Good morning. I'd like to go ahead and call the Oregon Transportation Commission meeting together for Friday. Happy Friday, everyone. Wonderful that you were able to make it and be here with us today. So we will go forward and start with the director's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the opportunity. I'd like to spend the next few moments, both with this agenda item and then the next, really to acknowledge and recognize the good folks we have the privilege of working with. But I'd like to begin first by welcoming our newest Oregon Transportation Commission member. Julie, on behalf of the ODOT family, it's my pleasure and a privilege to welcome you to the Oregon Transportation Commission. Now, many of you may know Commissioner Brown from her work across the transportation world. She has 22 years of experience in transportation planning and service implementation as the general manager for the Rogue Valley Transportation District. She has also served as the president of the Oregon Transit Association, in which she played a key role in securing legislative approval of the Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund for public transportation that was embedded in House Bill 2017, an opportunity to infuse about a little over $100 million a year into the transportation network here in the state of Oregon. Commissioner Brown has served on a number of ODOT committees, including the Transportation Safety Committee, and she served as chair of the Public Transportation Advisory Committee. Julie Brown shows up is the bottom line there. I, again, have had the privilege of working alongside Julie for some time, and as I said, she always shows up, and she has never once turned down a call to serve this agency. I also know this about Ms. Brown. She has courage. She's fearless. She takes chances, and she has no fear in making the tough decisions. And for that, I've always respected you. So, she has a deep knowledge of the multimodal transportation system. So there's no doubt in my mind that Julie will hit the ground running. I think she proved it yesterday with some of the focused questions that she asked in terms of the emerging technology conversation that we had. Very good conversation. And I know this for a fact, you will continue to add great value to the transportation discourse here in the state of Oregon. Commissioner Brown, welcome. Yes. Now, Madam Chair, I'm doing something I have never done before as director. But sometimes issues and events demand that you pivot in a new direction here. We got some good-looking guys with some hats on there. Sitting in the back. And gentlemen, I want you to stand up, all of you, please. Madam Chair, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to deliver, these good folks have in their hand, Driving Force Awards. This is one of the few things that we do to recognize folks who step up, go above and beyond the call of duty. This is our Region 1 bridge maintenance crew right here. And I'm going to recognize them as folks who embody and have exhibited our core value in their efforts, and that value is excellence. So, let's begin. So the Region 1 Bridge Maintenance Crew is being recognized for innovative solutions to emergency bridge failures that have played themselves on the I-5 corridor, on Oregon 99, Victory Boulevard, if you know that, that's moving toward Delta Park area, up in the Portland area, and then the Tualatin Valley Highway, TV Highway. This top-notch crew has responded to 4 very different major bridge emergencies just in 2018. Their emergency response involved failed timber structure members, severely damaged steel girders, which were hit by high loads, and a culvert that was failing extensively. Each of these situations would have closed the interstate or the highway. If not for the quick action and the innovative technologies delivered by this crew, we would have shut down the transportation system in the Portland metropolitan area. Their ingenuity, their technical expertise was put on display time after time within this 5-month period. They pulled out all the stops to keep traffic moving safely over these structures, which some are 85 years or older. Time after time, between April and August of 2018, this crew dropped the critical bridge work that they do on a day-to-day basis to keep that traffic moving on these major routes in the Portland metro area. The crew supervisor, Mike Gearing, The two coordinators, Jeremy Capper and Craig Valee, I hope I did pronounce your name correctly, and the and the 13, not even close, huh? And the 13 crew members are being recognized today with a Team Driving Force Award for excellence in their dedicated service to the public, for their workmanship, and for their passion and dedication serving our fellow Oregonians. I want to call them out by name as well. Just raise your hand and wave so we know who you are. First of all, Mike Gearing. Thank you, Michael. Jeremy Capper. Jeremy. Craig Valee. Veely. God, 0 for 2 today. James Bailey. Thank you, James. Chad Blackman. Robert Cox. Oh, fair enough. John Hafner. Thank you, John. Tim Nagili. Thank you, sir. John Nelson. David Oliver. Matthew Opie. Brian Page. Omar Sanchez. Ken Wilson. And Kevin Yoder. Gentlemen, thank you for what you do. You do it very well. Please join me in thanking you. Okay, I think you have some work to do now. So the final thing I want to share with the good folks here today, if you're in downtown Salem, pretty much downtown Salem, you'll go by a train station, and then you will go by a railroad baggage depot. And I will tell you the Salem Railroad Baggage Depot was awarded the 2018. Thank you, gentlemen. Yep. Outstanding. Be safe.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, as I was saying, the Salem Railroad Depot was awarded the 2018 Demura Award from Restore Oregon. Now, the Demura Award is to promote historic preservation and the reuse in the state of Oregon by spotlighting and celebrating outstanding rehabilitation projects and sharing the lessons learned from those in various case studies here. Hal Gard and his professionals were at the tip of the spear in terms of this restoration. This award is the only statewide award in Oregon recognizing creativity, perseverance, and craftsmanship required by and for outstanding restoration projects. So the Salem Railroad Depot is a 1889 structure. It's located in the heart of Oregon's capital. It's listed on the National Register as one of the last remaining Queen Anne railroad structures in the state of Oregon, originally designed as a holding area for rail passengers and their luggage and for shipping and receiving items via express. The building has been fully rehabilitated following years of neglect and decay. It now serves as a multimodal transportation hub in Salem, where Greyhound comes, where the Amtrak trains serve. We also have a bicycle hub there as well. So, again, kudos to Hal Gard and his professionals for restoring what was a beautiful piece of architecture to its glory that exists today. Well done, Hal. Madam Chair, with that, very, very good. With that, I will stand down from the director's report. And if you're comfortable with it, I'd like to turn now to the Mary Olsen Award. If I can, there we go. Many of you may know Mary Olsen. She was a member of the Oregon Transportation Commission, and this award was established in her memory in 2014. Mary brought an energy, she brought an intellect, she brought just a common sense approach that empowers others in their professional and personal lives. Mary Olsen personified the notion that public service is a noble cause. And this award seeks to recognize individuals at the Oregon Department of Transportation that demonstrates those leadership qualities of initiative, of innovation, and the attribute of integrity, all with the effort to improve the image of the Oregon Department of Transportation and serve our fellow Oregonians. The individuals I will speak about today, I believe, truly embody Mary's passion for public service. These are individuals that you go to. Every organization has the people that are go-to people, those you turn to in very difficult times to deal with a situation, and you know they will get the job done. These types of individuals I'll speak about today, They know how the organization works, and probably more importantly, they know how to work the organization. So in short, these are leaders you turn to ensure that the Oregon Department of Transportation accomplishes its mission. So let me begin first. Lana Tribby. Is Lana here? Okay, Tom, there you go. Let me tell you a little bit about Lana. This is a very special lady. Last April, Mr. McClellan had the privilege of presenting Lana with her 40-year government service pin. Lana is someone who's devoted her entire career to public service and all that that represents. She is a servant leader who demonstrates and embodies words like respect, integrity, reliability, and accessibility. She's a veteran DMV leader with work experience in nearly every area of this organization. Lana has led and been on point, I think, in 3 of the major work groups or program groups at DMV. She headed the program service group, the customer service group, and the field service group. And sometimes she was doing 2 jobs at once, overseeing these significant portfolios. Lana serves on the DMV management team, shares responsibility for developing and interpreting and implementing the division's policies, strategic initiatives, and long-range plans. She is excellent at simplifying, at explaining and providing a framework or the context for the complex laws, rules, and policies that emanate from the DMV. She also takes time. She makes herself available, accessible to all. She demands high standards, there's no question about that, but she shows concerns for the efforts and the challenges faced by her people. She understands that an effective organization is based simply on trust and relationship, and she invests the time to gain the trust and to build the relationships. She is solution-oriented, always working to develop options and solutions that satisfy the interest of all sides. Lana's career at ODOT is testament to her esteemed qualifications for this recognition. She also entered this organization at really, it might be, this is going to sound wrong, but at the lowest level, truly at a data entry operator. So she began at an entry-level position. She now resides at the highest level of this organization. So it is with great pride, and Tom, please share this with Lana, that I present the Mary Olsen Award to Lana Tribby. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to ask 2 people to stand up. I want Marilyn Holt and Darren Nevall to stand, please. These good folks are from our maintenance operations. Marilyn is from Eastern Oregon, the Pendleton area. Darren is from Southern Oregon, down in the Roseburg area for all intents and purposes. They're district managers. These are the shock troops of the Oregon Department of Transportation. These are the field generals as far as I'm concerned. And an ODOT district manager's duty requires a simple understanding that passion and commitment and inspiration needs execution. They understand this concept. It's certainly not foreign to Marilyn and Darren because they get the job done day in and day out. They know how to execute a plan. They also understand that the best leaders don't create followers, they create more leaders. Their experience has been a force multiplier for the Oregon Department of Transportation. Now, maintaining and operating a transportation system in Eastern or Southern Oregon is not for the faint of heart. At times, it's a long series of challenges, of obstacles and opportunities that come at them at a high rate of speed, where you need every ounce of your experience and your wisdom to get through the day. Darren and Marilyn's knowledge, energy, and focus ensure that we as an agency remain nimble, capable, and responsive, especially during times that are fraught with some unforeseen challenges. So it is my privilege. First, I also know that if I was ever in a foxhole, I would want to share that foxhole with Marilyn and Darren. So it is with great privilege that I present Marilyn Holt, Darren Nevall, with the 2018 Mary Olsen Award. Congratulations, folks. We're going to turn our attention to the information services discipline, specifically the enterprise technology area. Terry Molyneux. Terry? Now, Terry coordinates and executes ODOT's information technology security policies and controls, as well as assesses the vulnerabilities within this agency. He's not only doing that for the Oregon Department of Transportation, but his skill set has been acknowledged. He's doing it for the whole state of Oregon. Terry's going to transition over there and make sure that he's fighting the good fight with regard to information technology security here. The nature of Terry's job makes him less visible than most folks. He and his professionals are really the hidden figures, or what I would term almost quiet elites that work behind the scenes at the Oregon Department of Transportation. And I'll use his own words here because I think it really captures it. You know, Terry has said that when you work in the information services infrastructure, or in infrastructure in general, of any organization, it's easy to toil away day in and day out, wondering if anyone's noticing a difference, especially when you consider that you are doing your best work if you go unnoticed. Terry, your work has been noticed, my friend. I would note that the term integrity constantly comes up when you're speaking about Terry Molyneux. It's a reoccurring theme. And as I reflected on what I was going to say about Terry, I want you to know that it's your effort, your inquiry, your sense of direction. It seems to me it is always led by the facts. You consider all the options, make your decisions because they are guided by a highly developed sense of integrity. Terry exemplifies the essence of leadership, the willingness to take on very tough assignments, not only at the Department of Transportation, but for the statewide enterprise as well. He makes tough decisions. He makes clear-cut decisions. So, it is my honor to present Terry Molyneux with the 2018 Mary Olsen Award. Terry, thank you, sir. Madam Chair, I have the last award, and I would ask that Kelly Bruce stand up. Kelly is with the Strategic Improvement Program. And Kelly was given a very simple charge. No, not so simple. Craft a framework which would seek alignment around a common mission and vision, develop a strategy to execute against that vision, and then chart a course where this agency would effectively evolve through innovation and continuous improvement. Easy peasy, right, Kel? There you go. Kelly was at the tip of the spear as we crafted our agency's strategic business plan, a 5-year guide for the agency that provides a common set of priorities to keep this agency aligned and focused to ensure that we deliver on our core responsibilities. Kelly's leadership ensured that the vision was translated into clear and concise objectives. She continually provided sage counsel to the commission, to me as director, and to senior staff. Kelly excelled in helping resolve operational issues by having an agency approach from different perspectives, from taking different tacks than we've done before. She is a highly creative strategic planner and problem solver. She also has a quiet, steady style of leadership that was incredibly effective in prompting different perspectives to be placed on the table, thus adding new knowledge to our conversations, our deliberations, and our decisions. So it is my pleasure to award Kelly Bruce the 2018 Mary Olsen Award. Kelly, thank you. Madam Chair, with that concludes my remarks. Thank you for allowing me this time.
Well, and I think it's a wonderful way to really celebrate the hard work that goes on, and it's always a pleasure to be able to hear the stories There are a number of individuals that have made the decision to be in public service and have decided that ODOT is where they want to be serving. And I'm incredibly grateful for that, for the hard work that you put in. And every day we talk about safety a lot, and each of you have an opportunity every day to rise to the occasion to go above and beyond. And I'm sure that there are often times where we just are not aware of what's happening, and so it's nice to be able to celebrate that great work and be able to be here with you and hear about the good things that are happening. And you have a photo op.
I do, Madam Chair, and
yes,
that's what so I would beg the Commission's indulgence. I'd just like to get the award winners to come right over here. Is that correct? And we'll take a quick snapshot, then we can get back to business. Fair enough?
Go right ahead.
Madam Chair, you come with me.
Oh, all right.
Right over here? Okay.
Stand about 3 feet away from the wall.
Okay.
Turn the little obelisks a little bit down so they don't reflect out. More of a group than a line is better. That's flat to the wall, not
There you go.
if you're taller, move to the back, Ms. Beanie, and step to the front a little bit. More of a group than a line.
Okay.
So that the
More of a group than a
more of a group. Now, there you go. There you go. There you go. And then if you do, the front line swings over an entire person. And then in between, we're trying to get in between shoulders here. So you guys in the front. No, I'm working with people behind you.
Okay.
And it's still not quite there. Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna stand
You get in the middle. That's good. No, I'm sorry. I'm pointing. I hate to do that. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, right. And then we just got.
Okay. All right.
Good God, I knew this was so difficult.
We're trying. You want to let's see what we got. Okay. And we're gonna get 3. Y'all look great. Thank you so much. Making my job easy.
All right.
Excellent.
Oh, okay. Yes, yes. Right.
Your wife is here. Get your face on. Thank you.
Wonderful. Congratulations.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you for your hard work. And I too would like to welcome Commissioner Brown. Having an opportunity to have served with you over the last handful of years, I've been incredibly impressed not only with your intellect, but how you can distill down a room in very challenging times. We've had some CMAC comes to mind. Where's Mac Lind? But what I have really appreciated about Ms. Brown is the fact that her comments were not about her own region many times. Your thoughts were about how we do right by the state of Oregon. And I appreciated that very much because those were sometimes we don't have easy conversations that we have to have, as the director mentioned. And I think that you are just skilled at being able to carry a message and remain with that statewide view and making sure that we understand what our true roles are. So thank you so much for taking on this challenge, and I'm honored to work with you. So let's move on to public comment. So I first like to, Donald, if you'd like to join us, we'll go ahead with Mr. Leap, and then I have Sharon, and I think it's Nassett. Did I get that? Okay, wonderful. Sorry, Sharon. It's at where? Okay, what? Great. So please, Donald, join us. Great to see you. Please, I know you know the drill, but please state your name for the record. And Jackie has the time clock for us, and so the floor is yours. Yes.
Look at that little red light. Wonderful. Director Garrett, Chair Boehne, commissioners, guests. Boy, am I glad to be here. As many of you know, I've been dealing with some health issues over the last roughly 2 years, and although we're not completely finished with them, it has not managed to slow me down. So I'm pleased that I can attend this and maybe have just a moment of comment. Director Garrett was so right in mentioning the wonderful completion with Halgard's work of the former baggage area at Salem Union Station. But if I may embellish a little bit, Salem also celebrated the 100th anniversary of its passenger station just a short while ago. And for Chair Bainey, Vice Chair Brocklin, newest member Brown, and for the commissioners that aren't present here, I'm proud to bring along a little lanyard of celebrating that 100th anniversary. Amtrak on its website has a Great Stations website, and not only in just the descriptions page, but the Salem station is on the banner headlines of the top of the top of the website, first pages to celebrate the wonderful building that we have in Salem on our Cascade Station. I would also mention that Portland, Oregon, just a little ways up the road here, has the oldest operating station west of the Mississippi in the Amtrak system. And I think now it's around 118, 119 years old. Forgive me if I'm off on that just a little bit. But anyway, so when you have a chance to wear a lanyard, you're going to have a name badge or something, be proud and wear our Amtrak Cascades green. I think it's a terrific idea. I'm really pleased with our system, with our Amtrak system. And I know I'm running out of time here, but just quickly, the number of riders that volunteer to get an Amtrak guest rewards card, which gives them collections of mileage and some purchases for rides on the train, continues to grow. And at the end of the 2017 federal fiscal year, which was last September, Oregon had 116,000 volunteer members, up from 100,000 the year before. This grows in 10 to 20% amounts each year. We continue to support our passenger train system. We need to consider expanding and developing on that. I know I'm out of time. I just want to make one last statement, and that is, currently in the middle of the day, the 45-mile, 50-mile trip from milepost 301, which is in Portland, down to Market Street in Salem on I-5 is a 2-hour trip. It's a 51-minute trip on Amtrak, on our Cascades train. This is unacceptable, and the I-5 system is going to continue to get further clogged with our population growth that everybody agrees on and everybody recognizes. And the easiest, cheapest way to expand that capacity is expanding our midday frequency. Track is there. All we got to do, run another train. There's 300 people that can be on that train. 285 people is the seating capacity of one of our Cascades train. It's real easy to do. We mustn't lose sight. The legislature recognizes that ODOT is a state agency of vision. I completely agree with that. I support it, and let's have the vision to move ahead with that too. Our Amtrak ridership was up in 2017, even though this statistic was done after the Chambers Bay little mishap. It does not include the unfortunate accident in the DuPont area, but we'll have those statistics shortly. But overall in that year, everything I'm hearing is that ridership is still up. Thank you very much.
Let me personally thank you. Your advocacy and your voice in helping us to be informed has brought us to where we are. And I think that the organization that you also represent is critical to making sure that we understand what the complexities are and what the challenges are to ridership. It needs to be, people need to have confidence in the system. They need to feel as though it's going to meet their needs. And I think that you have done an incredible job of making sure that that's at the forefront of our decision making. So thank you so much for your efforts and just advocacy and all that you've done to make sure that we're informed.
Thank you, Chair. I have a little piece of fan mail here for everybody with the convenient contact information if there's any questions that you'd like to get to.
Wonderful. Sharon, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. For the record, I'm Sharon Nassett. I'm with a 501c3 nonprofit called Economic Transportation Alliance, and we work on transportation and economy issues in Oregon and Southwest Washington, into the ports and out of the neighborhoods. And I would like to thank Matt Garrett for coming in this morning to a rousing, positive applause for his employees. And I will say, I actually have family members, I won't say their names, that work for ODOT, and I have to say, they like him a lot. They say he's really a good person to work for. So, yeah, well, and you don't necessarily always hear that. So I've been involved in transportation since the I-5 Trade Transportation Partnership in 2000. We came in with 3 projects that were all recommended for further study. One was a West Arterial. I have handed you these maps, and they are on our website, and I'll have some out here. And this first map is about north. You'll see the North Portland Peninsula. You will see Vancouver, Washington at the top, and the page ends at Swan Island. It is a freeway that attaches to I-5 in Vancouver, removing the freight and hazardous material out of the downtown area and providing the Port of Vancouver, the waterfront area, and the downtown area on and off access to I-5. Jansen Beach, it goes across where it is it's vacant land, crosses to Marine Drive, and then it tunnels into Swan Island. The bottom of this map does not show that it connects to I-5, 405, but the other maps do. And you'll also notice it comes over to Highway 30. The bridge locations across the Columbia and the Willamette are already in regional transportation plans. And you're probably very, very aware of this map and have seen it many times.
I have not seen this map. No, that was a question.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. When you giggled, I was like, well, the gentleman right there is holding the second page, which shows it is one of the alternatives, the alternative that everybody keeps talking about during the Columbia River Crossing Project. The brand new freeway is in the exact same position as any project going forward. 80% of the data is reusable on this. The remaining 20% is what we will construct, where it will be constructed, and how it is paid for. This brand new I-35 corridor, it has brand new freeway attached to both ends. Transit is bus. It is paid for by 10 cents on a gallon of gasoline for 10 years total sunset. The allowing scratch off and lottery tickets specific to the project to embellish, because it's all bike and ped accessible out to the ports, downtown areas, and Rivergate area and the Swan Island to have an urban renewal area tax on new businesses, not existing, not expanding. That would more than pay for it. Not only would that more than pay for it, it would also pay for other bridges that connect specifically to infrastructure that is currently here. You can see this is I-5 in the north, I-5 in the south, Marine Drive, Columbia Boulevard Corridor, Lombard Highway 30, all brand new, all seismic. The bridges are all seismic. It does no good to have a bridge that crosses the river and you can't go to the next on or off ramp because it's fallen. An entire new corridor connecting Portland and our industrial areas. This is what, when they talk about that the people in St. John's, North Portland, and the people who stopped the Columbia River crossing and had it stopped 5 times requesting alternatives, Metro, the independent panel review, several different groups, the Oregon legislators in 210, and is that going the other direction? Oh, I beg your pardon. Anyways, each of them asking for alternatives to removing the bridge. Structurally sufficient, meets all requirements. Any window of opportunity to take out or do anything different to that bridge is long gone. We have 2 bridges across the Columbia. If we built 2 more, we would still be in last place nationally for our size. You didn't know about this because it's being hidden. It is one of the alternatives. If the Columbia River if we are considering that we need to go across it, then we need to look at the alternative that actually works, that people want for, and that is no toll. None, totally paid for.
As you are keenly aware, discussions are occurring again about this topic, and I very much appreciate you bringing alternatives, having been on the commission when we had the discussion most recent. I think the lump on the back of my head has finally gone down, but I appreciate you very much bringing forward this material for us to review and look at, and for your voice in making sure that we know that there are alternatives out there as well. So
Well,
thank you.
I think the big point is it needs to be brought out so that citizens know they have an alternative to the other, and they don't. And what I'm asking is that you poll them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. Good to see you both.
All I ever
and
do is get emails from you.
please have a cup
I'm
of
glad you're
coffee and
better.
stay with us if you'd like. And
Oh, yes.
do we have anyone else who would like to approach the commission for public comment? Okay, so we will go on to the next agenda item. Thank you both. And we have an update on House Bill 2017 implementation. Ms. Silva. And thank you for the lanyards.
Actually, thank ODOT.
Ms. Silva, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Chair Bainey and Commissioners. I'm here to give the monthly report on how, for the record, my name is Kat Silva. I'm the House Bill 2017 Implementation Project Manager, and I'm here to give the monthly status update on how implementation is going. And the dashboard itself was included in your supplemental packet, and I'd like to start off by just acknowledging and noting that we have another initiative in the complete column, and that is the modification of duties and authority. I know that that sounds potentially troubling to have that move over to complete, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to continue to monitor and do that good work of identifying areas where we can maybe refine the governance structure and the kind of roles and responsibilities. But I think a tremendous amount of work has been done thus far to kind of move the needle on that. And at a certain point, it just becomes business as usual and not implementation of the House bill. And so really the kind of monumental things that that we did to implement this piece were the updating of the delegation orders and adoption of those to make sure that we accounted for all of the House Bill 2017 work and how the OTC really wanted to manage those responsibilities and delegate to staff and then interact with staff about keeping them accountable. So I'd say that was probably the primary, with the secondary being the work plan for the commission and the bylaws and getting all of those things up to date. So success. Yeah. On that, and I wanted to get a bit of feedback from you all on the new format. I know we kind of briefly, quickly breezed over it last month, but that would have been the first time you would have seen it this way, with the implementation highlights being kind of as intense as they are, I guess, but really wanted to call out some of the big moving pieces that you'll see this meeting and then also kind of what's to come in the next month. So.
Well, we use this tool. The legislature also is using this tool. And so I want to say thank you so much for the refinement of continuously working on making sure that this is reflecting the information that we want to be seeing, yes. And that we want to be seeing where areas are working well and in fact, the areas that are not too. Mm-hmm. But I do want to offer you just a compliment of when we were before the legislature for legislative days. It really was beneficial and helpful for them to see how we're tracking this huge body of work, mm-hmm. and making sure that we can be transparent and accountable to all the initiatives in it. And it's your work for us to look good, and I just want to say thank you so much for the commitment that you've put into this, and your work is really helping to make sure that we are transparent and accountable to all of this. So I think that every time it gets just a little bit tighter and closer to what we need to be seeing, but I don't have any changes at this point, but I would offer to my colleagues if there are any adjustments.
No, I think this, I agree with everything that the chair just said. I think this is a great tool, and you have really worked hard, and the work you've done on it shows. And I think each iteration has improved it. And it's the kind of document that we can use broadly to bring people up to speed in a hurry. And so it's a very valuable piece of work, and congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Since I didn't see the other documents, and this is the first time, I like it.
Oh, good.
And I think it's easy to follow, but I don't have anything to compare it to. But as we move forward, I think that if there is anything that additional information we need, certainly we'll point it out to you. So thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. The other thing I wanted to, if there are no other kind of questions or comments on the dashboard itself, I'll just kind of submit this for this month's report. And then I'll also mention that we did get a second interim letter from the Secretary of State on the real-time audit, and sticking with kind of the same initiatives that they're focusing on, dropping off the transparency, accountability, and performance website, and just kind of focusing and really getting into the nitty-gritty with the Safe Routes to Schools and the Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund, the STIF, for transit. And I think that's because it's where the most significant investments are, and they want to make sure that the public dollars are being used appropriately. They identified a handful of risks, two I think related to the STIF, four related to Safe Routes to Schools, although one of which was resolved at the time we received the letter. And I think there's, in our response, which was included in your supplemental packet, you know, we acknowledged and accounted for how we're mitigating those risks and what we're doing to effectively resolve them before they become an issue for us. So that's where that stands. They hope to wrap up that real-time audit at the beginning of December, and we should see a report come out from them sometime between the first week and third week of December is what I'm hearing. So, yeah.
Real-time audits with something as important as the funds that we just secured through the legislative process, and for Oregonians paying in now to transit, I think it's really beneficial for us to know what we should be watching for in areas in which we have some vulnerability. And so I think this connection with the Secretary of State's office is really critical to that success. And so just for those that are working on it, I mean, it's a large organization, and when we're open to being able to refining and making sure that the work that we're doing is meeting those obligations, you know, I don't know how much more transparent we could possibly be, but I think we're open to making sure that we're doing the right thing.
And I think they've even acknowledged, sorry, Chair Bainey and Commissioners, they've even acknowledged where they see kind of, where they want to really truly understand what it is that we're doing. And so it's been a really collaborative process, and some of the work that they've done to try to understand the work that we're doing has been beneficial to us, from what I understand. So
Great.
It's been a really good partnership.
Great.
That's all I have.
Okay.
Thanks, Kat.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you for your work. Okay, next we have the Department of Transportation Performance Report.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, for the record, I'm Travis Brower, the Assistant Director, and I'm here to present you the quarterly performance report. I will be very brief, though. You receive this on a quarterly basis, both in your materials, and then I believe you also received an email version of it the other day that included a link to the online performance dashboard that we update on a quarterly basis as well. It contains a lot of the same information in here, but in a more interactive and graphical format that we hope will be helpful for you to be able to peer into some of these key programs where we have data on a regular basis. I will make just a couple of notes about items in here. This quarter, we added in the strategic business plan implementation work so that the Commission can have a view into that on a regular basis. We were obviously in front of you on a regular basis. Ms. Bruce was in front of you every month or every couple months, updating you on the management review implementation and the strategic business plan implementation. We've now gotten to the point where the commission's role in that is essentially to provide oversight and feedback at potentially some key places. So we're going to be continuing to bring you information on what we're doing across all those different areas in this document. You won't necessarily see a lot of change each quarter because this is a 5-year strategic business plan. And we're trying to remind everyone that Rome wasn't built in a day and the strategic business plan won't be implemented in a day either, particularly given all the other things that are on our calendar. So that is the one major new item that is included in here. I would also note there was a lot of discussion yesterday about with emerging technologies, the need to look at ways to fund the transportation system that rely not on the number of gallons burned, since we're transitioning away from fossil fuels as our primary mode of power source for the transportation system, and towards paying by the mile, so all users are paying their fair share. We include in here on a quarterly basis an update on road usage charging, where we bring to you the latest information on both our Origo program and what we're doing to try to develop that. As Matt said, and I think was brought up, we are so far ahead of everyone else in the country that they can barely see our taillights. We are trying to bring some other states along. Utah, for example, now has a mandate to develop a similar program. We're working very closely with them. We're also partnering with our sister states to the north and south with a small-scale interoperability pilot with Washington State. Their Transportation Commission has been assigned that work, and WashDOT is also working with us. And also a larger-scale interoperability pilot with California that's going to kick off next year. We're also looking at new technologies and public awareness and some additional options for how the technology could perhaps provide some value-added services. So we have a lot going on here, and I think it's likely we will be back in front of the commission actually briefing you a little bit more in depth on what is going on in road usage charging, particularly as the Road User Fee Task Force has forwarded a legislative concept that is now in development to take this program to the next step, turning it from essentially a proof of concept into more of a revenue program. And there's also just a lot of activity that we will likely be launching to help the public understand the challenges we have with long-term funding and how a road usage charge might help us with those issues. So with that, I will stop, turn it to Mac, who's going to talk to you about projects, and then we'd be happy to answer your questions. Or now I'll answer your questions.
Well, and very quickly, I believe it is December, and I'm looking at Lynn for the road usage charge group to come before the commission and give an update in any legislative requests. So just for your knowledge, I believe that's teed up for December.
Yeah, that's when we have tentatively slated it in there, subject to all the other puts and takes on the agenda, where especially that month will be value pricing as well. So that will be, could take a little bit of real estate on the calendar.
Yes, I think we're at 9 hours at this point, so we're
I say go for 10.
We might need to pack a lunch. Okay, Mac, the floor is yours.
Chair Bainey, members of the commission, Macklin, Interim Highway Division Administrator. Just a reflection on what this item is about in terms of, I call it current events of the day, what's happening in the agency, in particular in Highway Division. Provided an update in July when we were in Seaside, very similar. That was a little more focused on events of this summer and construction season really gearing up at that point. Wanted to touch on a few things, being in front of legislative committees last month, providing a similar update. A lot of positive feedback in terms of our successes, but also some things to come. So wanted to just highlight a few things for you, but also answer any questions around some of the projects that may be in your report of interest. So I'll just try to walk through kind of what's going on right now. With the good weather we're experiencing, which is awesome in terms of being outside, it's also affording us the opportunity for our contractors and our maintenance crews, such as the bridge guys you were introduced to this morning, to get some critical work done really at the end of our construction and maintenance season before we start gearing up for winter operations. So just acknowledge that we're able to get to some more stuff. If you reflect on last October, and Chair Bainey, you're about the only one that was here in the room at the time, it was a monsoon. So we're taking advantage of that. In addition, you'll see our contractors out there getting a lot of late season paving done. We typically shut that down about the end of September. They're able to stretch that a little bit further. But really that affords us the ability to put those critical striping and pavement markings down towards the end of the season, which are those safety aspects we look for. One thing of note that impacted our contractors recently is a large natural gas pipeline in British Columbia failed recently, and that had a dramatic impact on our asphalt paving operations with our contracted community. There's such a demand for that natural gas at their plants that they were forced to shut down or dramatically reduce their capabilities to produce asphalt. So one plant I heard went down to about 30 or 40%. Some were shut down completely. So that slowed us a bit down. I know some of our local partners felt that more than we did, just as they try to wrap up city and county projects. So just a reflection of an unforeseen circumstance that kind of slowed us down towards the end of the season, but that's starting to come back online. I mentioned the legislative updates I provided. I was in front of 5 committees. I got the honor of following after you, Chair Bainey, and Commissioner O'Halloran. Some really good stuff coming out of those conversations with them. It's to celebrate some success. I thought I'd hit on a couple points for you. JTA, Jobs and Transportation Act. So much discussion about House Bill 2017, but we're really at the finish line on JTA. 2 projects in particular. The Tillamook project, right in downtown Tillamook, is wrapping up as we speak. Paving and striping occurring last week and into this week. So that's a kind of one of the last remaining big projects. The other is probably near and dear to Commissioner Brown's heart, the Rogue Valley Expressway down on Oregon 62 in the Medford area. That's a brand new 4.5 mile facility. We don't build too many new roads, but that's one of them. $120 million investment out of Jobs and Transportation Act and federal funding for that project, which should open towards the end of the calendar year. So one of the benefits of that project is not only just giving a congestion relief, if you will, but freight. We're certainly hearing from several of our freight industry partners in the area of the time savings that they're going to occur by opening that road up and just what that's going to mean to their business and cost savings. So just reflect on that for a minute. The Joint Committee, as they were going around prior to House Bill 2017, they were out on that job site hearing from those freight industry partners. So I think that was a real success that we're about ready to open the door on that project. There's about 4 or 5 other projects that are using the tailing remainder of funds from JTA, and those are going to construction next summer. So we're really getting close to the finish line, just spending the last few remaining dollars of JTA. So just want to celebrate that success. Jumping into House Bill 2017, I think a real awesome accomplishment is we completed the very first House Bill 2017 funded project, which you heard about last night, the Tom McCall Roundabout in Prineville, with a little humor last night as well. That project, really, House Bill 2017 pushed it to the finish line with funding. It came in at the last dollar and helped to get it there. So the project's been completed, a real success of our Region 4 partners as well as our contractor. I-205, the auxiliary lanes up towards the airport, that's the trigger project for the next round of funding increases as the gas tax and weight mile tax are increased. Part of that project is in construction right now. The other part will be going to bid here shortly and in construction next year. So I just wanted to provide some confidence to the commission that we're meeting that requirement and well prepared to get that project on the ground next summer. So a very important project, maybe one of the most important in the near-term horizon to get that next funding increase. Scottsburg Bridge down in Region 3 is a $40 million investment, a very significant project on Oregon 38, Highway 38 outside of Reedsport. It's a big project in terms of replacing a significant bridge. It's also part of our seismic triage approach in Southern Oregon, which you heard about last night as well. That project's going to bid as well. So that's kind of the 2 big House Bill 2017 funded projects that are hitting the ground and moving into construction next season. The other thing I wanted to do was just celebrate some of our other successes, and a couple of these you've heard about. One is the Big Fix PDX. So the I-5, I-84 interchange and the ramp work we did this summer. Tremendous amount of outreach. I'm sure you heard about that in your own personal life, but I know we had some conversation up in Region 1 at lunch at a commission meeting earlier this year. A lot of success from that project, a great partnership with Hamilton Construction, our contractor. The project's not completed yet, but the majority of the major impacts to the traffic and the traveling public, as we're through that now. We're going to school on what our media and outreach campaigns did and the success of those, and learning how do we further deploy social media in our use of getting that message out. We, in 1 month, had 2.4 million posts in our social media platforms, largely part of that project outreach. So getting the message out and going to school of how can we explore that throughout the state where it makes sense. The other one is I-5, the auxiliary lanes between Highway 217 and I-205. So if you drive south out of Portland, you're going to feel that impact, a benefit, if you will. So if you're coming on Highway 217 onto I-5 south, you'll be able to stay in that right lane if you want to head 205 north. 2/3 of the traffic that gets on at Highway 217 is going on to 205. So a significant capacity improvement, congestion improvement, but really it's an operational improvement to get traffic through there, and a safety benefit, eliminating that weaving that occurs in between those interchanges. The commission may remember when you were in Bandon earlier this year, you actually approved some additional funding for that project to advance it from a 2-season job to a 1-season job. So paving work's done, striping work's done, a few of the other elements are wrapping up now, but just want to remind the commission just of the action you took earlier this year to support that. And then looking towards next year, I just did kind of a quick assessment of what are those projects we have on our portfolio, maybe above $5 million in size. Just what are those big things that are going to hit us? And a couple, I'll just do a quick round robin across the state just to draw your attention to them. In Region 1, while the big fix PDX this year and the I-84, I-5 ramps was significant, we've got some other big ones coming. The Fremont ramps, so the bridge ramps to the Fremont Bridge, those are coming up this year with some significant impacts to the traffic, as well as replacing some mechanical pieces of the I-5 southbound bridge known as the trunnion. That's going to be a pretty significant travel impact as we have to completely shut down one of those bridges and divert folks to the other one. You're going to have an opportunity to hear more about both of those projects in coming meetings, as well as several others, but I just wanted to highlight that work that's coming up. 2018 was a very busy construction season. 2019 is going to be busier. 2020 is going to be even busier. So just a heads up. Region 2, jumping to the south, Beltline at Delta Highway, a very significant interchange improvement in that area. Leverages the work we've done through OTIA and JTA in that Lane County area, but that's the next big one coming up on the list is Beltline at Delta. Jump a little bit further to Region 3, down south on I-5, the Roberts Mountain passing lane. So if you've driven that section of I-5, there's a lot of up and down, and Commissioner Brown, you know this better than anyone else. Roberts Mountain being a very critical area where the freight traffic certainly has to slow down as they climb that hill. So we're adding those climbing lanes to that section. A very significant project, moving a lot of material to make room for that. So that project's getting ready to kick off as well. Region 4, similar on Highway 97 in North Klamath County, adding some passing lanes there as well. So you constantly are hearing about our importance of US 97, not only for freight traffic, but as an alternate route to I-5. Certainly capacity and operational needs, as well as safety in the wintertime. It's another series of passing lane improvements on Highway 97 that we're continuing to do. We've got a long-term strategy of where those go, so just the next iteration of that to come. And then Region 5, significant, I think, are improvements to both of the passes on I-84, Ladd Canyon and Cabbage Hill. Last month, you approved an increase to the Ladd Canyon project. Those bids came in higher than anticipated. You approved that project. It's a very significant $30 million investment. We've got a project going to bid to improve safety improvements at Cabbage Hill as well. So just two very significant projects on that heavily traveled corridor, and really both of them are around winter operations and improving safety. So just draw your attention. Those are two big projects in Eastern Oregon. Lastly, just want to mention a significant project you're going to hear more about next month as well. Steve Cooley, Chief Engineer, will be here to talk to you about work zone safety and our efforts to pilot new ways of striking that balance, as Director Garrett speaks to, between mobility and safety. And this is on I-5 as we pave between Salem and Woodburn. If you recall, last year we were paving north of Woodburn and we had a tragedy with a Knife River employee killed. So taking to heart that experience, working with our contractors, we're, I think, exploring every option around how do we tackle that next project next summer. So you're going to hear Steve Cooley talk about that next month as we try to find those positive barriers to put a little space between traffic and the employees that are out there doing that work, but striking that balance between safety and mobility. So you'll hear a lot more about that project next month and the opportunity to ask some questions. But that's a significant impact, not only to the folks that use that corridor, but also to trying to get that work done in a safe and efficient manner. So with that, just mentioned we've got a lot of great stuff coming. And I think it's a success of our summer. Done a lot of amazing work, and fire season, while it's been impacting to us and our crews, we've actually come through okay, not lost a lot. I will reflect on the historic Columbia River Highway as a last moment. We're still really struggling with that maintenance aspect of the Eagle Creek fire last year. In terms of the material that's being dislodged coming down the hill, the safety impacts of just not being able to open that facility. So as we look to that long-term impact of that fire, looking across the state, what other fire impacts we're going to deal with for a long term. But certainly that's an impact to our crews, even maybe more so than snow season anymore. So just reflect on the summer as we start to make that transition. So with that, thanks for giving me the opportunity.
On that particular project, it's best that we do take our time, and I know that there could be a frustration about how long it takes to make that operational, but it's a tragedy in and of itself. We don't need to have another because of trying to be too quick in meeting that need. So thank you for that. Do we have any specific questions on the projects or the update? I want to say thank you to you, Mac. You really have stepped up, and a significant retirement that we experience in that division, it didn't have to go seamlessly, but it did. And it's an honor and a pleasure to work with you, and I'm just grateful that you took that on and were able to carry us through this time. Your work in front of the legislature, the confidence and trust that you hold, I'm pleased and grateful for what you've done, and it's just, like I said, it didn't have to be as seamless as it has been. And you just really just kept us moving forward, and all of the interactions that we've had has just been at a level that was beyond my expectations of how that transition goes. And so thank you for exceeding expectations and for your commitment to leadership and for what you've done.
Thank you very much, Chair Benny. I very much appreciate the opportunity. It's been fun, and just so you know, I've been harvesting every nugget I can out of Paul. So just leave it with that. Thank you for the comments.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, next we have a discussion about, it's an action item on the STIF funds. Mr. Guard.
Chair Baney, members of the commission, special welcome to Commissioner Brown. This will be new information for you, so I look forward to briefing you on it. I'm Hal Guard. I'm the administrator of the Rail and Public Transit Division for the Oregon Department of Transportation, and I'm happy to be here today. I'm going to provide a kind of a quick update and provide a little bit of framework for the discussion that Karen's going to lead around three pretty critical topics for the Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund. One is to get Commission's input and approval for the criteria used for selecting our discretionary grant programs. We're going to go through this a little bit quicker because we've really modeled this along the same type of structure that we use for both our state and our federal discretionary programs. So hopefully that'll be a little quicker conversation. We really wanted to reserve the bulk of our time for what I think is likely to be a much more meatier conversation, and that's around the factors and considerations and criteria used for Commission's rejection, which is a much harder decision than approval of the plans that are required to be submitted in order for a qualified entity to receive the formula funds. So jumping right into that, of course, the 1/10 of 1% payroll tax has been started to be collected by the Department of Revenue as of July. Those funds are spread across 4 areas. The 90% formula fund that goes to the qualified entities, we're currently estimating will be, their first distribution will be about $194.5 million. That includes 2 additional quarters of collections. So just kind of keep that in mind. For the first discretionary grant program, the competitive program, we're estimating just under $11 million, 10.9, for distribution in that program. For the 4% discretionary program that's designed to improve connections between service providers statewide, we're estimating $8.7 million in funds available, and we're proposing that we add some additional federal, what we call 5311F funds to that program to the tune of $1.3 million, so that that entire discretionary program will come in at $10 million. And the idea is really just kind of leverage that opportunity and see how many folks we can get to pick up those critical connections between communities and service areas around the state. Of course, a final 1% of the overall collections comes to our division, and we're able to administer this new group of funds and to help provide some technical resources to our rural providers who are receiving resources that they're not at a level that they're certainly not used to receiving. So that's a set aside as we go forward. Our formula fund solicitation notices, so for the main bulk of the money, it was issued on the 19th of July, and the first set of plan applications are due to come into us for review November 1st, and we are looking to come back to the Commission in the March-April timeframe to solicit your final approval to pay out those formula funds. Based upon our conversations around the state, we estimate about 25 of the 42 eligible recipients to be able to submit their applications on November 1st. That includes TriMet, which is over 50% of our formula funds. So significant body of coming forward. The notice of availability for the 2 discretionary programs are planned to be released by us on the 1st of November as well, and we expect to make selection and award of those funds in the July-August 2019 timeframe at the first of the year. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Karen, and she is going to walk us through the meat and potatoes of those 3 new program areas.
Thank you, Hal. So similar to the Karen Criswell, I'm the project manager for implementation of the Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund. I'm going to start first with the STIF discretionary 5% solicitation, project selection criteria, and relative weighting. So as Hal mentioned, similar to our other processes, we are coming to the Commission for approval of the project selection criteria. We're bringing forward a recommendation from the Public Transportation Advisory Committee, and then ODOT staff is also recommending the relative weighting of those criteria. The OTC's investment priorities for both of these funds were articulated or are articulated in the STIF administrative rules, which were previously approved by the Commission in July. At the time when we brought those forward, we had indicated at that time that we intended to rely heavily on the investment considerations that were in the administrative rules, which is what we're bringing back to you today. So referring to attachment 1 in your packet, the first set of criteria that are used to determine whether the applicant and the project are eligible to receive funding. For discretionary, STIF discretionary, all public transportation service providers are eligible for funding except for nonprofits, for-profits, and ODOT. All public transportation project types are eligible for funding except for ongoing operations projects and light rail projects. Looking at the table, in the first column, you'll see the focus areas, and the content in those focus areas is taken from the STIF administrative rules as well as the OPTP goals. The second column is the actual evaluation criteria, and you'll see the OER references that are associated with those particular criteria. And then the third column over on the far right is the score weighting for those criteria. The criteria for discretionary, including the relative weighting, emphasize fleet condition at 25% weighting, improving services to low-income households and other vulnerable populations at 20%, a sustainable funding plan or plans to ensure there is an ongoing commitment to the proposed improvements at 20%. So that would relate to if somebody were bringing forward a pilot operations project, for example, we would want to have an understanding that they did have a sustainable funding plan to carry that pilot project forward if it were deemed to be successful. And then to a lesser degree, environmental and public health considerations at 15%, coordination of public transportation services at 10%, and the statewide transit network connections at 10%. In a moment when we finish with the discretionary criteria, we'll talk about the statewide transit network. And what you will see there is that the scoring and the criteria are the same. It's the relative weighting that are considerably different, with a much greater focus on coordination and filling gaps in the network. So I'll just mention that now. And then finally, when under circumstances where all things are held equal, when there are ties in scoring, additional consideration is given to geographic equity, as well as the match, overmatch, or leveraging ability to leverage other funds. So that is the basics of the criteria as well as their scoring. I'm happy to address any questions you might have.
No, but do we want to put anything on the record in terms of making sure that any conflicts or, because we did have a discussion at a pre-meeting with Commissioner Brown. Is there anything that we want to note?
I think just acknowledging the reality is you're making a decision for everybody.
Right.
So the conflict, I really don't think that, but just acknowledging
yep.
This is what we've looked at, but since it applies to everybody, there are no issues that we need to be concerned with.
Excellent, thank you. Okay. In looking, I think it's just making sure that we don't, there's such a difference between the large and the small, urban and rural. So the weighting, I do like the leverage piece and the funding at the, being able to differentiate if you have a tie, essentially. But the scoring, I also appreciate that there are other areas about those connections that are going to be picked up in other grant streams too. So I think that what you've done is a nice hybrid of bringing those together. Please.
Go ahead, Hal, if you.
Chair Bandy, members of the commission, I just wanted to quickly mention that the criteria that we're bringing forward is subject to change over time, and that's very, very intentional. We recognize that as this money becomes a regular feature, folks start building programs around it, needs are going to change. And so one of the structures that we try to intentionally build in is our ability to change the weights so that we can emphasize those new needs as they develop, as funding increases, infrastructure gets put in place, and individual entities' emphases will change. So for example, for those small rural areas, highest priority they may have for a discretionary plan or their formula funds is simply to come up with a plan, get it implemented, or even just coming up with staff. Once that staff's in place, once that plan's in place, then the next area that they may have the greatest need would be vehicle procurement. So we want to make sure that we put a structure in place that meets all of our appropriate accountabilities to make sure that we're clear and transparent, but also allows us to change the weights and priorities over time as we develop and grow as a state. So that's kind of a filter I wanted to make sure that we emphasized as we walk through this body of work.
Madam Chair, first off, I want to thank both of you because this has been a really daunting task, and also thank the people that volunteered to step up and not only be on the Rules Committee, but also to be on the committee, the workshop committee that actually created these guidelines and worked with the ODOT staff. There were hundreds of hours put into this project, and it was difficult. But the one thing I have to say is that there was rural, urban, small urban, anybody that really wanted to step up and really look at this. And although in the beginning I think everybody was in it for themselves, they soon realized that wasn't going to be acceptable, that we had to look at this. This was a statewide opportunity for us, and we had to do it right. And so the waiting, I think, is very important. And I think that Mr. Gard was right when he said that this is going to change over time. This is our best guess. It's a lot of money. It's a big opportunity, and I think that the transit division will make it right for years to come. So thank you for your hard work on this. I really appreciate it. Karen, I know you spent a lot of hours and
thank you.
Sweat on this, so thank you.
I want to join and thank you for all the good work you're doing on this new program. A lot of challenges anytime you're trying to implement something that doesn't exist until now. So this is, so I'd echo those comments of Commissioner Brown's about all the work you put into this. I was curious about whether you were seeing organizations partner, coalesce, because one of the things I think about when I think about this, about the importance of transit statewide, and about what we've heard in meetings around the state about the need for transit. But we want as well to have viable, long-term, stable situations that we can build off of, or at least I do. And so I'm just curious what you're seeing there in terms of partnering and trying to think about organizational, let's say, credibility or stability to implement this over time. And I recognize your comment about it's going to evolve. But as I look at the criteria specifically, I'm thinking about things like, coordination of public transportation services and statewide transit network connections, and these criteria and the criteria about having legal, managerial, operational capacity, and all of these things we're trying to get going here, that we're maybe seeing some of that coordination happening on its own. So at any rate, it's just a broad question about what you're starting to see, or whether it's too early to see much of that yet.
It's a great question, and it's actually one of my favorite topics with this whole body of work, because we're seeing this balancing act where for some entities, their first reaction is, oh, we're getting this great new money. And so some of these tensions between counties that are qualified entities and cities that are, I need my sub-allocation, what's my share? And really, neither of those are entirely accurate. We have pieces built in that are the process for how you work together, as well as the outcomes of funding allocation, and then layer on top of that the decision considerations for both formula funding and for the discretionary fund sources. So we're seeing some really exciting things in some area. One that springs to mind is that we haven't seen as much historically. Columbia County, for example, who has a lot of residents who commute into Portland for work. They submitted a project application to TriMet's qualified entity, TriMet, and their advisory committee for consideration. And that advisory committee approved funding to send funding outside of the Tri-County TriMet area to Columbia County to help those folks make it into the city. So that, to me, is exactly the kind of thing that we want to see, and I think that's a really, really exciting outcome. I think our providers are also at a point where they're scrambling to meet the requirements to be able to submit their STIF plans, and collaboration and cooperation, as you all know, take extraordinary effort. So I think we're just starting to see the beginning of that, and I think it's a great foundation. So I'm excited about the opportunities to come. The end. Regarding the discretionary, the discretionary criteria. I don't know if you want to take them one at a time or if you want to go through all three items.
What's the pleasure? I would say we could go ahead and move it as a block at the end.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
if you, okay.
Okay. Okay, so with that, I'll turn your attention to attachment 2, which is the statewide transportation or transit network program. And you'll recall that one of the things that's somewhat unique about this is that we took the opportunity to integrate the STIF inter-community funding with our existing inner-city, FTA inner-city funding and program. So at the same time as we're kind of standing up a new program, we're also doing a new kind of integration for us, which has presented both some challenges and some opportunities in terms of how we structure this. So some of the differences in eligibility, because of the FTA funding, private and nonprofit public transportation providers are eligible to apply directly for this funding pot. Operations projects are allowed in this solicitation as well. When we look at the relative, so again, evaluation criteria the same. The weighting is really what is different here. So we have a 30% each emphasis on coordination of public transportation services. So this is providers working together. This is integrated planning around affected communities and partnering, as well as the statewide transit network connection. So that's actually improving or maintaining the service between geographically separated communities. It's technological innovations that improve efficiencies and improve the user experience. And it's also improving local connections to and from those infrastructure improvements at inter-regional transit hubs. And then to a lesser extent, all the other focus areas have a relative weighting of 10%. So on this statewide transit network, it really is on the connectivities and the partnerships. Happy to entertain any questions.
So the discussion around, and maybe this is more broad in general, a high-cost driver in the healthcare arena are the non-emergent transports. And so as we look at creating systems that meet a variety of needs, and I know it'll look different across the state, I note that the health outcome piece is at 10%. What discussion went into, should that be 10, 15, 12? The recognition of how we build this system going forward with more funding hopefully is less fragmented and meets needs. And I do know that there are specific needs to certain populations, but in general, there are some systems that could be improved upon to be able to meet some of those needs as well. So what kind of a discussion occurred, and was 10% debated, or was that really where the group felt that should land?
I think in the statewide transit network solicitation, there wasn't tremendous debate between the relative weighting of the criteria that we're seeing as lesser criteria to the overall focus of the statewide transit network. Where we see that funding and that emphasis tends to be more, I think, in the formula fund programs, where you start to see there be a bigger focus on connecting people with medical and social services and other services that improve quality of life or maintain it. Al?
Yeah, Chair Baney, as you recall, and there was quite a bit of discussion, we still have our special transportation fund, which is really targeted towards those folks, elderly and disabled communities. And we wanted, and I think we still kind of overtly want to make a distinction between, we have funds, we want to maintain and continue to grow those funds to serve those particular special need populations, but what we heard pretty clearly in the conversations as this legislation was being developed was collaboration, cooperation between service providers and improving intercity connections. So I think, you know, when you see that smaller 10% weight, as much as anything, it's a reflection that we were trying to emphasize what we heard legislatively. So.
So it isn't necessarily the STF, or STP rather, special populations per se, it's the access to care in a general sense to individuals that first, it's wonderful for choice riders to be able, but for individuals where owning a vehicle is just costly, we want to make sure that they have access to information.
Absolutely, and we are watching this play out very, very carefully, and we've just had our own internal conversation where we continue to want to be the service provider of last resort. And so we will evaluate this, seeing what kind of programs we get, what kind of applications we get, to see if we are you know, really kind of hitting our marks. And if not, then we'll come back and we'll reevaluate our own program and where we're able to distribute funds that come directly to our division and perhaps allocate those in a different fashion. And we've had that conversation internally quite a bit.
I just want to add one thing, which is, since we are at the beginning with this, I think everything we can do to build programmatically something that can continue to be supported by the legislature and potentially enhanced, because I think we will need more transit around the state. And so as you're developing this, I'd encourage you to stay in close touch with us about what you're seeing evolving here, because there'll certainly be scrutiny around, so it is as well a new tax, there'll be scrutiny around whether people are getting value for the money. And as Commissioner Simpson was saying yesterday, you know, return on investment. And I'm very supportive of this. I think it's important around the state, and again, we're hearing from people all around the state, I mean, you're hearing a lot more than we're hearing, that this is critical. It's a critical element from very small cities to medium-sized to larger cities and counties throughout the state. And so I guess all I'm saying is I want us to be working deliberatively toward ensuring that we're off to a good start and we're building something that will sustain itself and be supported over time. So it's just a comment, really.
Commissioner Brooklyn, I appreciate that, and I'm hoping maybe this plays out in the conversation we have later this afternoon. The balancing act that I kind of continually wrestle with in my role is the faces of the two Oregons. We have our major population centers and our major travel corridors, which we can't shove enough resources at to meet the demands that we currently have in those areas. And at the same time, we have our rural Oregon, which is a unique nature, an aspect of a state we all love, and we want to make sure that people continue to grow and prosper and thrive and make sure that there are opportunities in those connections, but they're going to look different and they're going to be different. And so trying to figure out how to take the surfeit of plenty, what it feels like a surfeit of plenty, and making sure that we're attending to where the population is and where the demand is, and also attending to those that are least served or not as well served as others, is something that we just wrestle with. And the input from this commission is absolutely critical as we continue to try to delve into that conundrum.
And I just say about that, I mean, there are a couple of factors here. As this rolls out and enjoys some early success, which I hope it does, that will drive demand. As population in the state increases, that will drive demand. As people get older and the boomers age out, that will increase demand. As millennials, many of whom are already opting out of cars completely, that may continue into their middle years. And so there are a lot of forces at work here, I think, that are indicators to us today that there'll be growth in the transit realm. And so we're going to need more money. $100 million, whatever this is going to produce, whatever this is going to produce is not going to be enough. So that's why the record of success early is important. We need to point to things that are effectively addressing demand in the early years of this in order to explore ways to enhance the funding, and we're going to need to enhance the funding, and not just to stay even with population growth, but to try and take a bigger bite of the apple here. So that's why the record is so important, because it leads to the ability to go bigger, and we're going to need to go bigger here, I think, and it also will reduce the pressure, hopefully, somewhat on constantly having to weigh, rural, smaller city, medium city, larger, that we will be able to get to a point where we really have a more robust statewide transit system. And I think it's critical that we get there, because if you need it, it doesn't matter whether you live in Brookings or Pendleton or LeGrand or Eugene or Salem. It's all, you need it, and we need to be able to provide it.
Thank you for your comments. I'm glad it came out of your mouth and not mine. And I don't know, I got him to drink the Kool-Aid, but I don't know how. But I think that one of the things that we need to recognize is the funding for this, transit has been behind for so many years that they're playing catch up now. And so at this point, it is a great opportunity, and it has been pounded into the heads of the transit providers, the qualified entities, that we need to be responsible with this money. We need to show that we're making a difference, and we need to be careful. But it is the beginning, and I think for rural areas, it's going to be a catch-up situation for them. They're not going to be able to be where they need to be right out the gate. It's going to take them a little bit of time. But once they have that plan in place and they're able to move forward, it'll give them the opportunity to actually grow their system and make it really make the difference. I think it's going to take them a few years, just because they don't even have some of them didn't even have a plan in place. So that's the first step for them, is just planning what they're going to do. So thank you for your comments.
I think that's a good underscoring of the flexibility that this allows, and that it's not just the end of the story. It's meant to be a living document that we can adjust and be sure that it meets the needs going forward too. So do we have other questions, or was that the end of the story on this particular side?
That's the end for me on this one.
Any questions on the second part? Okay, so we'll go to the third.
Okay, so now our, I think, even more meaty topic, talking about approval and or rejection of STIF plans, a portion or all of the STIF plans. I think the first thing that I really want to emphasize is that first and foremost, our goal is to assist transit providers so that they're prepared to submit strong plans that are consistent with statute, rules, legislative intent, and are really going to deliver service improvements across Oregon. To that end, we've been providing extensive technical assistance, guidance. We've done online webinars, we've done regional workshops, we've done extensive one-on-one consultations with our regional transit coordinators throughout Oregon. And I wanted to share just with you a little bit what our process is before these STIF plans even come to you for review. Once the providers have submitted their STIF plans to us, the review process includes several opportunities for them to address any deficiencies. The first thing that happens is the ODOT staff do a completeness review, and that will result in a checklist that goes back to the providers, the qualified entities, to let them know if we've found their application to be complete. At that time, we will start to identify issues that appear to be potential rejection consideration issues. They'll have an opportunity to submit additional information or submit a revised STIF plan that addresses those completeness issues or other deficiencies. From there, the documentation report goes to a PTAC subcommittee. PTAC is formed about, I think it's about an 8-person review subcommittee whose job it is to really dig into the STIF plans, to look at those potential rejection considerations, and then make a recommendation to PTAC as a body. Once the PTAC subcommittee completes their recommendation and submits it to PTAC for their consideration, we will use that to start a 14-day comment period in advance of the PTAC meeting. That will give qualified entities another opportunity to provide additional information, clarification, and so forth. At that point in time, when PTAC determines it will, if they determine that they will recommend some or all of any STIF plan, applicants will have up to 30 days to refine and resubmit their STIF plans to ODOT prior to us bringing the plans to OTC for action. In this first formula funding cycle, this is unique to future cycles. We're actually offering 2 opportunities for qualified entities to submit. Those opportunities are 6 months apart. So if for some reason a qualified entity has something that just cannot be corrected within that period of time, they will be able to withdraw the application and submit a new one on May 1st. So that's another opportunity there to get it right, so they're not having to wait until the next biennium to submit. So I just wanted you to be aware of all of those steps and those iterations, and that we really are doing everything we can to try to help them to be successful. So moving into the actual considerations document. So that's attachment 3 in your packet. You'll recall that the qualified entity receipt of formula funds are conditioned on the OTC's approval of a STIF plan. The OARs specify the STIF plan contents as well as rejection considerations. Now, the list of rejection considerations is not exhaustive. The OTC may reject STIF plans for reasons that are not explicitly stated in the administrative rules. So in anticipation of this first funding cycle, as we were going through the process and talking with qualified entities and continually trying to provide clarification about what's good enough, what needs to be done, what's in the rules, it became increasingly apparent to us that we really needed to have something that had the weight of the commission behind it, to really say this is what the commission is really going to be looking for when those plans come to them for review. PTAC, as well as the PTAC work group that Commissioner Brown mentioned earlier, was really instrumental in working with us on these. So in that document, in the first column, we've identified the potential reasons to recommend rejection, and this is coming from staff and PTAC to commission. The basis for those recommendations, and there are 3 major areas or bases for that kind of recommendations. Some are pulled straight from the OARs, others we are pulling from statute, and then finally legislative intent is the third area. The third column to the right is the indicator. So how do you know that that reason has been sufficiently triggered that would cause you to think that maybe we ought to reject this portion of the plan? And then the fourth column is potential mitigations or things that happened that are unique to a particular area or circumstances that would cause you to think, well, they didn't really meet this part, but these extenuating circumstances merit additional consideration. So the primary area of focus is that the STIF plan is incomplete or doesn't adequately explain how the qualified entity will accomplish project goals. Another big area of emphasis is the qualified entity failed to properly form and consult with a local STIF advisory committee. Third is a failure to allocate 1% of the formula fund per year to to improve high school student transportation to the extent practicable. My favorite word. Failure to allocate funding to at least one project that improves services to low-income households. You'll recall that the legislature had 7 areas of emphasis or interest. Only one of them is a requirement. The others are things that the legislature cares about and wants QEs to report on. Because improvements to low-income households are reflected in 3 of those areas, we thought it was pretty important that there's at least one project that improves service to low-income households. The next area is that a STIF plan proposes to use the funding to maintain an existing service, so-called supplanting of state funding with supplanting of local funds with state funds, rather than expand or improve services. And then the qualified entity failed to collaborate with public transportation service providers or potential providers when developing their sub-allocation method. So they both, so getting back to both the process and an outcome. And then the easy one is proposes to fund a light rail project other than operations, which are not eligible for funding under statute. So at a high level, those are the subject areas. The indicators get into some level of complexity as well as the potential mitigations. And I think I'll just pause there and have you draw my attention to whichever areas you want to explore in more depth, unless Hal has something else to say and he's getting kind of twitchy.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
We have heard a fair amount about the concern of expanding services and that there would be a loss of local resources and they would be augmented or supplanted with state funds. So if we could go through that piece a little bit more in detail, I think that'd be beneficial both for transparency of how the discussion had gone and what the remedy or the mitigation might be there.
Yes. So that would be a rejection consideration number 9 on page 2. This is an area where we're leaning on legislative intent to prioritize expansion or improvement of services. The indicator that we identified is a project that was previously funded by local funds that are being reallocated for non-transit purposes. So if you use the funding for transit purposes, but you're still gonna fund a transit purpose, and it's just shifting which pots, we would not see that as a supplanting issue per se. So potential mitigations or exceptions to this. So one example would be if there is a pilot operations project that the provider then wanted to continue and maintain that as a full-time service, ongoing service. If one-time discretionary funding were ended, so for example, if there was FTA funds or some other funding pot that was discretionary and the funding has gone away and you need to figure out how to continue to fund the service. So that would maintain the service. And if it were to maintain a project that was a formula fund expansion or improvement project during a previous funding cycle. So this is particularly important in this first cycle because once you expand or improve service in this first cycle, perhaps even the first year, from then on you are maintaining that service. So this was one of those areas where the OIRs are a little bit confusing because it does say that you can improve or maintain a service. And the reason it has that maintenance language is because we knew after this first cycle, we would be using the funding for maintaining. That has caused some confusion in some areas of the state where we are hearing from some providers that say, well, it doesn't have to be for new funding. We can reallocate some of our local funding and lean more heavily on STIF. So this one is particularly important, I think.
And I have so if what if the funds were to be used for transportation but not transit? What if someone were to decide, we've been allocating funds for X for transit and now we want to put that to roads? Was that ever a discussion and what would that example look like?
Yes, that was discussed, and as it's currently conceived, that would be considered supplanting, and that would, yes, so that would be a potential rejection recommendation.
My understanding with conversations with our legislature and those that were championing this, that would run concurrent with what they would say it would be supplanting as well. I just wanted to see how that had gone. Thank you.
And I just wanted to clarify this, out of all of the conversations around standing up this new program, the supplanting conversation has probably been the most heated, where I've had service providers statewide come directly to me with concerns. And because of that, I made a point as I went around the state rolling out the new Oregon Transportation, Public Transportation Plan and talking about the new State Transportation Improvement Fund plans, that I made a point of talking about the importance that the legislature put behind don't supplant state funds for local funds and reapply them. So the extra effort has been made, as what I'm trying to say, to try to get the word out as clearly and as widely as possible.
As we approve this criteria, I think it's also important that we too have a level of understanding of where the committee work had been and where our providers are at and where this commission is in terms of setting that policy. I think that if we were at counter purposes with our legislative intent on this, I think that it would do a lot of damage. And so folks could disagree, but that's a legislative discussion because we right now, I think, have very clear intent of how we're to use the funds. So thank you. I don't want to belabor it, but I think this of all of them, we really need to make sure is buttoned up.
Chair Boehne, thank you for that. Part of the reason we wanted to bring this forward at this time before we had even received our first STIF plans, we plan to communicate this widely, broadly, repetitively, just to make sure that it's very clear the Commission's intent. The timing, I think, is also beneficial in that if for some reason we're getting this wrong in some fashion, we'll probably hear about it pretty quickly, which allows us to address those concerns and to continue to move on so that we are able to stay on our project schedule and the distribution schedule.
So first, I agree with the discussion about supplanting, and I think it's the integrity. First, we have to assiduously follow legislative intent on this for the reasons the chair mentioned, and the reasons I mentioned earlier, that we're building credibility, and so we have to have a credible program. And I think leakage to non-qualified expenditures is a good way to get people thinking negatively about this program. We don't want negative thinking about this program. When you reject someone, switching subjects here, is there a communication as to why, and maybe a little coaching that goes on so that we don't have people just feel shut down and that, maybe if you partnered with another organization or if you did these 3 things in a future round, because it's new, people are trying to figure it out, we're trying to figure it out, the recipients, the applicants are trying to figure it out, and just seems to me it's important to have some communication going on with all the applicants, and particularly, well, the ones that are receiving funding. There's a set of things you want to say to them, but those that are denied funding, I think it's equally important, if not more important, and this is all, again, building a credible program, to communicate with them so they don't just feel like, oh, we got a 1-sentence letter denial, and then we didn't hear from ODOT on this, and we don't know why they didn't like it. And so could you talk to us for a minute about how you envision actually communicating decisions?
Absolutely. So leading up to this point, we have our regional transit coordinators that are doing things like meeting with our qualified entities to review their local plans to see if they're consistent, if they're going to get the job done, talking with them about opportunities for how they can bring those into compliance, brainstorming with them for how to keep it moving on process, reviewing their advisory committee bylaws and identifying challenges there, things that could be improved. So fast forwarding to when we do our initial completeness review, part of that process will include a brief description of what the potential rejection considerations are that are identified. That communication will go out. will be closely followed or might even be done by the regional transit coordinators who are going to say, this is the issue. Let's look at how we can fix this, get you resubmitted, get it corrected, and keep you moving. It will be absolutely no surprise to any applicant if the commission were to make that sort of decision, because there will have been multiple iterations, both from ODOT staff level, from a PTAC rejection consideration as well. And so we are planning on keeping very close and thorough records on those communication processes. So we're very clear in our understanding of that.
Thank you, that's great, and I think it's critical. It's a critical piece of this.
Is there an appeal process?
Yes, the OARs provide for one commission appeal of a rejected STIF plan. The other piece I just want to highlight is that it's not a all or nothing. There is the potential for lack of a better phrase, a line item veto. So if there's a particular project that is a supplanting project, but the plan overall otherwise is consistent, we will have that ability to reject a portion of a plan.
Further questions or comments? Okay. If not, I would welcome a motion. I think we have.
So, Madam Chair, I make motion to approve the State Transportation Improvement Fund discretionary project selection criteria in consideration for rejection of application.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you so much for your work.
Thank you.
This is not easy, and we are greatly appreciative of your hard work. Yes. Okay. Next, we have requests for approval of the negotiations of a public-private partnership around fiber optic cable in our highway right-of-way and the Office of Innovative Partnerships as well. So, I'm going to get a glass of water and I'll turn it over to you.
Everybody in our family gets one of these. We pay for it.
That's
Firm-wide,
great.
all 10 cities, national.
That's wonderful.
And in my letter from the 10 years I was for managing card, I implemented that. And then I gave up my parking place.
Thank you. Please, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Good morning, Commissioner Bailey, Chair Bainey, and commissioners. My name is Ray Mabey. I'm serving as a project manager for an effort that we've brought before you to use our Oregon's Innovative Partnerships program to take advantage of an opportunity to expand our broadband system for the agency. And I've brought a team here with me today and let them introduce themselves.
Good morning, Chair Bainey, members of the commission. My name is Art James. I'm with the Office of Innovative Partnerships.
Hello, my name is Galen McGill. I'm the Intelligent Transportation Systems Manager here at ODOT.
Chair Bainey, members of the commission, my name is Curtis Danka. I'm ODOT's Chief Information Officer.
Just one quick moment, go right ahead.
So, Madam Chair, our firm, my law firm represents the company involved here, so I'm going to recuse myself from this discussion and leave the room. It's not that I'm not interested in the subject, I just think that's what I ought to do in this case, because we do work for the company involved here. Thank you.
Chair Bainey, I prepared a kind of brief overview of the Innovative Partnership Program, largely for Commissioner Brown's orientation to this. It's a program that, it's a tool basically that ODOT has that we can use for kind of specialized situations like this. The program was formed by the legislature in order to develop partnerships with private entities to maximize entrepreneurship and putting innovation into projects, to expedite delivery, and to leverage private capital with public funding.
The definition in statute under OIPP is any proposed or existing undertaking that facilitates any mode of transportation. So it's extremely broad authority and can be used for highways, rail, ports, facilities, telecommunications, et cetera. The program allows for the ODOT to solicit proposals, to, in some cases, accept unsolicited proposals, and also to enter into direct negotiations when the OTC gives approval of that. The direct negotiations portion of it has not been used terribly often, but in cases where we can get very quickly to an opportunity such as this, it is allowed under the OARs, and so that's the nature of the request that we have today. The process for direct negotiations, what we've asked today is for approval to enter into negotiations. ODOT, along with the company and Department of Justice, will hopefully negotiate agreement. We have a template actually that's been provided that they have used in other jurisdictions, so we're not going to be starting with a blank piece of paper on it. But once we get to a final agreement, we'll bring that back to the OTC for approval, presuming that we get there. The statute provides for partnerships through negotiated agreements. There are administrative rules that govern the program that are quite precise. It requires us to consult with the local governments as we're doing that. And probably the biggest change from the normal process ODOT uses for procurement and contracting is that we're exempt from the provisions of Chapter 279, the State Procurement Code. Some of the projects that have been before the commission in the past, we did a solar highway project that's received national attention. The West Coast Electric Highways charging stations were done through OIPP. Origo, as our road usage charge, was done using this program. We're currently in the investigative stages of LED replacement project in Region 1. The company that we got approval to enter into a contract with is doing a thorough audit right now of the current state of lighting in Region 1, and we expect to have that delivered in December. What we have before us now is an opportunity that has been brought forward by Facebook to put fiber optic cable into state highway right-of-way from Prineville to Chemalt. It's about a 100-mile section, and it's integral. Their purpose is to link their data center with a major east-west trunk line that goes through there. Our benefit is that we would be able to use some of that broadband fiber access for our purposes into the future. We've been advised by DOJ that has to be an exchange. We can't purchase it, we can't sell it, that's really an exchange of equal value, and that will lower our costs and provide reliability and redundancy for benefits for ODOTs into the future. And I'm going to turn it over to Galen to kind of talk about what the future use cases may be.
All right, thank you, Art. You've likely heard this term, the Internet of Things. It refers to the growing number of machines, sensors, et cetera, that are connected to systems and providing data back to systems, all without human intervention. And it's transforming the way our world works in a number of ways, and so it's really no surprise that it has application within transportation, this idea of connected equipment, connected systems. So within your packet is a document entitled Transportation and Broadband Communication that lists a whole bunch of use cases for connectivity, broadband communications that are beneficial to the transportation system. And so my purpose today with this section of the presentation is just to highlight a couple of the use cases. There's many more, but highlight a couple of them that would be applicable, and particularly within this corridor, I think we've identified at least around 30 locations where a connection to the fiber would be useful to us in managing the system along this corridor for various applications. So the first application is a somewhat obvious one, I guess, but it's a video for traffic management. It's among current applications, one of our biggest needs for bandwidth use. Obviously, transmitting motion video takes a fair amount of bandwidth. It's very useful to us for both incident management, monitoring a situation, determining what response resources we need to respond to incident quickly, clear incidents. It's very popular with the public from a traveler information perspective. But most importantly, in a rural area, it's very helpful to ODOT staff to have the ability to monitor road conditions in a remote section of a highway. But in many of the rural areas of the state where video would be helpful, broadband connections are either not available or cost prohibitive. This is a relatively new technology for ODOT as we're transitioning our traffic signal technology to a new controller technology that benefits from connectivity. We are implementing what's called automated traffic signal performance measures. And what it is the ability for a traffic signal to report back data, a continuous stream of data about what's happening to the signal, gather that data, process that data, automatically turn it into these set of performance measures that are very useful for our signal operations staff to manage the signal operation. This is one example of several, but each black dot on that chart is representing a single vehicle approaching the signal. And it's a measure of arrival in green, which is the more dots we can squeeze between the red and green line is a measure of how effectively the signal is operating. But it's a new set of tools that are available to staff to more efficiently focus resources and proactively address issues without waiting for complaints on the signal, to know exactly what's going on in our signal and be able to effectively manage it. This example is from kind of a smart building technology as applied to a HVAC system. A lot of detail in this chart, but it's an example of the kind of connected building technology that is useful to ODOT staff to manage, remotely diagnose, understand what's going on in a particular building, to manage energy use, and to, once again, identify and deal with potential issues that occur on the system. Particularly important when you consider the large number of buildings that ODOT manages that are distributed across the state. So this type of remote management monitoring type of technology can be very, very helpful for us as we manage that large portfolio of buildings. We're going to move a little bit into some maybe future case kind of stuff that really was a subject of the workshop yesterday afternoon. And I'll just start with this discussion that the USDOT has been having this year, a series of listening sessions around the country called the National Dialogue on Highway Automation. It's really intended to bring together automotive industry as well as transportation agencies to begin a dialogue around a partnership that's new. In the past, we build roads, they build cars, but the future is going to require a different type of a relationship between those two entities. So this dialogue was looking at what changes need to happen in order to better enable automated driving on our highways. And the particular session I was able to participate in was specifically focused on digital infrastructure and data. So it was really looking at what are the enabling technologies that will help automated cars work better on our roads. And I think, while, as we learned yesterday, some of that's still a little bit uncertain, one of the things that's key is this ability to deal with data and broadband backhaul, that sort of thing, will be a key part of enabling some of this vehicle to infrastructure type communication applications that we envision. One pilot project that's been underway, that's a current example of some work ODOT's doing in this area, but that's been operating since the end of August, is a connected vehicle pilot project we're doing on Mission Street in Salem. It involves 7 traffic signals where we're gathering data back from connected signals back to a central system. That's, we're gathering data at 1/10 of a second resolution. It's a data set called signal phase and timing, so it's data about what the signal is doing right now. We're taking that data, combining it with a map to interpret that data. You have to have the vehicle needs to have a map so it understands where it is and which signal phase data is applying. It applies to it. And we're publishing that data via the internet. Yesterday we talked some about the radio and certainly radio communications, but one trend that's really undeniable is the internet connectivity of vehicles. And so this enables us to do applications today without waiting for the radio communication stuff to be resolved, and publishing this data in a way that a car can use it. And one example today is in an Audi vehicle. They do have a feature called personal traffic assistant, signal assistant, that will can use this data and provide that to a driver in various types of applications. All right, the last slide is really looking more towards that future and the vast amount of data that an automated vehicle produces. It's essentially a mobile computing platform gathering all kinds of stuff. Now, as the discussion was yesterday, there's some uncertainty about how that evolves, what types of systems we'll have, what kind of applications we'll have. But there's some big opportunities here, which of course, as I already mentioned, for the V2I, vehicle to infrastructure type of applications, this type of backhaul capability that this project represents will be key to enabling some of those applications that depend on this data flow. Hopefully these examples help illustrate the importance and value of this type of an asset to both today and the future for operating the system. I'm going to turn it over to Curtis now to talk further about the connection of this project to some broader state initiatives.
Okay, thank you, Galen. I want to talk about some of the connections that we have with the state as a general. I think Chair Boehne, you had mentioned yesterday with some other presentations around connected with other agencies and the larger picture. And one of the things to note is that we have a lot of network connections in a lot of places around the state, connecting our DMV offices, connecting infrastructure with ITS that Galen's responsible for. The significant component here is the access to fiber. Fiber essentially offers a much higher, almost unlimited ability with bandwidth and the capabilities of the optics that we just don't have in a lot of places right now. And so that's what really differentiates this. There are also initiatives that ODOT is engaged with, notably one called the Oregon Fiber Project, which is currently underway. I know during legislative days a couple of weeks ago, there were some presentations made about their progress. We can get you more information on that if you're interested. That's an initiative led by OSU, OHSU, U of O, PSU, and Portland State University. And a number of agencies have a seat at the table, including us. I sit on the executive steering committee for that initiative. One of the things that we are stewards of, that ODOT is stewards of, is a very valuable asset, and that's our right-of-way. And being able to utilize it to further, first and foremost with this initiative, further the transportation system. If there is excess capacity, we may have the ability to contribute to larger state initiatives, which could help move forward initiatives that are in place with the governor's office, like underserved communities, underserved schools, and then connections not only to our facilities, but other state facilities, because fiber does offer a tremendous amount of capability that we have access to. Subterranean fiber installs are very expensive, and I wish we could do them more to get our facilities connected. The business capability enablement that you get with that, with all sorts of things such as ITS and license plates readers and those kind of things, it's just incredible. The issue is that it's really expensive to get those facilities out, especially to the rural parts of the state. So I think Director Garrett mentioned yesterday, this is a surgical strike in one area, but we definitely feel that there might be opportunity in the future, both to support the transportation system and get more of these types of devices that Galen talked about in place for the transportation system, but also if the capacity exists within our right-of-way to do these sorts of installs, it could really expand the state's ability to serve communities, to serve schools and other parts, even our own agencies within the state. So I just want to make that connection there, is that we're also in close partnerships with those other organizations, and they communicate with us regularly to just get status updates. And while this by no means is this isn't not in the way of the Oregon Fiber Project, they understand the ability that it has to maybe augment the system in the future.
So with that we'll open it up if there are any questions from the commission.
Just a comment. I wanted to thank you for meeting with me last week and helping me understand this project, and you actually made me sound pretty intelligent yesterday, so thank you. But I think this is a great opportunity. Personally, partnerships, especially when there isn't a cost to the state and we can do it in a legal way, I think that it's great that we get opportunities like this, and so I'm pretty excited about it.
And I appreciate those comments. I am as well. So can we talk a little bit about how we make sure that there isn't just a partnership with one entity, that this also allows for an opportunity for others in the future as well? I'm not sure who maybe wants to take that.
Yeah, Chair Bainey, I'll take a stab at that, and these guys can back me up. As ODOT fulfills its broadband needs along a corridor, that need is done, but our opportunities lie in other corridors as we move across the state. And this venture or opportunity now helps us understand that relationship, create a framework to move forward, and then look at other opportunities in other areas where that competition can come forth.
And I by no means want to diminish the importance of the partnership out of the gate of someone, a private entity that's wanting to go with us and partner and take what could be some risk as well. But I want to make sure that we don't block out the opportunity for others in the future to be able to use this knowledge as well. So I think we have, we need to get Commissioner Van Broecklyn back in the room. Yes, thank you. And while he will not be participating in the dialogue or in the vote itself, he will be, I think, mentioning that he's abstaining.
Chair Bainey, as I mentioned on one of the slides, there are 3 ways that you can get into the OIPP program. One is direct negotiations, another is unsolicited proposals, and the third is doing a customized solicitation. So if this is successful, we may choose to open up for other corridors, other vendors, a similar model in the future. And because I think what you heard was the appetite for broadband is only going to increase.
I think we will continue to create the haves and have-nots in our state if we cannot be really aggressive in trying to come up with creative ways to meet the need in the more rural parts of our state. I think we want to make sure that you don't hear Chemult, Oregon very often, and you certainly don't hear Prineville, Chemult, and Facebook together either. So it's exciting to have these opportunities come forward, and I think it's a testament to the leadership and the creativity of ODOT to be having an office of innovative partnerships to be able to have these a pathway for these opportunities. Hello again, Commissioner.
Hello, nice to be back.
Okay, so at this point, I would welcome a motion.
I guess I don't have any choice on that, Tom. So I make a motion to approve to enter into a direct negotiation for public-private partnership to place fiber optic cable in the state highway right-of-way under the authority of the Oregon Innovative Partnership Program.
Okay, and I will second. Is there further discussion?
Madam Chair, I have my law firm represents Facebook on unrelated matters, and therefore I am recusing myself from deliberations or voting on this matter.
Okay, so I will do an individual count. Commissioner Brown?
Aye.
And chair votes yes. So thank you very much. Look forward to hearing updates on how we move forward. Thank you for your time. Yes. Okay, next we have another action item requesting approval of the proposed changes to the standards for accessible parking places. And I do know that we have public comment as well, so we can take that after we have the presentation if that works best, or I'll leave it to, wonderful, thank you. I'm sorry? Okay, great, thank you. Hi. Mike, please push so we can hear you better and capture your, yes.
All right,
sorry about that. No, wonderful to see you both. Thank you for joining us.
Mike Kimlinger, I'm with Oregon Department of Transportation. I'm the state traffic roadway engineer, and we have a guest sitting with me.
I'm Carol Fulkerson. Is this on? Yeah.
There you go.
Okay. My name is Carol Fulkerson. I live in Bend. I'm a disability advocate. I'm a member of the Central Oregon Coalition for Access, and I'm on 2 committees for the National MS Society. And I'm joined here today, show of hands of folks from with the MS Society in connection. Thank you.
So today we've brought forward a change to the accessible parking standards, and it was suggested by Mrs. Fulkerson, and we took a look at what was suggested. We've taken that around to the interested parties and stakeholders. I've got a short little PowerPoint showing what the changes are. So the labeling of no parking in the striped area, which is the access aisle, and then the addition, if needed, of a sign at the end of the access aisle saying that you should not be parking here. There's I don't know if it's a growing, but there is quite a bit of a need for something to increase the awareness that this is not a place where you park. We've got a couple of pictures here at the end that are very obviously violating the intent of this location. So the addition to our standards really simply show how to do the marking and where it should go, including signing. And the signs are probably sort of augmenting the idea that you shouldn't be there, and especially in an area where you might have a lot of blowing sand or perhaps snow, something like that that might obscure the pavement markings. And so here's a perfect example of someone who decided that they were only going to be there for a few minutes. What the heck, let's just park there. We see this across the system and across the nation. It's you know, I'm only going to be there a few minutes, and so what's the harm, right? You didn't even violate it. Yes. So the hope here is that with more emphasis, more people will be aware of what they should not be doing and what the intent of the location is. Even though it's been marked off and striped in a manner that indicates that you're not supposed to be parking there in the first place, and would give enforcement one more tool to be able to use to say, it was really obvious you shouldn't be here. The proposal is to go to take and adopt a new set of revisions to the standard, and with that, I think I will hand it over to Carol and let her make a few comments.
Okay. All right, thank you. So I presume you've received the comments that I submitted in advance because I wanted to keep you on schedule, and when I start talking about accessibility, things drag on. So I just wanted to add to that the lack of understanding, I've got some comments I was going to make, but I'm going to wing it a little bit. The lack of understanding, not just in Oregon, this is around the nation, that people who appear to be reasonable, intelligent, well-informed people, members of the public, do not understand why the access aisle is there. And in the comments that I presented to you, there's a photograph of my friend Shelley in her power chair. I don't know if you've seen that photo. And she's exiting off the ramp in the access aisle. Her chair is shorter than many of the scooters that are on the market. So they need the full access aisle. Her vehicle, the improvements to her vehicle cost more than the vehicle itself, and her power chair cost more than her daughter's Nissan, brand new Nissan. So when a person spends that much money to be able to get around and they can't park, it's missed opportunities in the community. And, people with disabilities, we are the average member of the public. We just get there differently. That's all. So in order, presuming that you adopt these standards that ODOT has very kindly drafted, education is going to be a big piece of this, because there are folks who are going to look at a no parking sign, and as Mr. Kimlinger said, well, I'm only going to be here for a few minutes. I'm not parking. I'm only going to be here for 10 minutes. I don't know what the definition of parking is to some folks, and some will look at a no parking sign and think, I'm not parking. I'm confused. What does this mean to me? And so there really needs to be a lot of education in the public, and not just for folks like this person here, but there are people who just truly do not understand the accessible parking, the space that is needed. The education also is for people in the disability community, because I have seen placard holders parked like that. And for some of them, I think they may be seniors approaching the point where it's time to give up the driver's license. There's also a lot of discrimination about, well, you're not as disabled as I am. the MS community knows how much we need the access aisle and the accessible parking. So there is a whole package around the education needed on this. So I would really invite, again, presuming you approve this, I would hope that you would have some method, some way of encouraging, let's say DMV, ODOT, what others, BOLI, I don't know whom else, but I'd really like to see an ongoing education campaign going around accessible parking, because if a person can't get to the doctor, to their job, to events or activities, it's affecting the whole community and not just one person. So with that, if you adopt this, if you approve this, just know that there will be about 400,000 very happy placard holders in the state of Oregon who will applaud your action, and their spouses, family members, caregivers, everyone who leads life with them. So I thank you. And I do want to say that my friend Mike Volpe has some comments that he would like to add, if you have time for that, or where you want to do that in this agenda.
We absolutely have time, and we can do that now.
Sure.
If that
Mike,
works well.
can you come forward? Or
whatever works best for you works for us. Thank you, Jim.
I'm just going to repeat what he says.
Great. And let's make sure that the microphone gets on too, so we can capture the comments. Mike, we're thrilled to have you. The floor is yours.
I have a very soft voice.
I have a very soft voice. So Thomas will repeat what I say.
I've had MS.
I've had MS
40 years.
for 40 years. And it's progressed to the point
I need accessible
where I need an accessible vehicle
and a driver.
and a driver.
I'm legally blind,
And I'm legally blind,
so I can no longer drive.
so I can no longer drive.
I'm very frustrated.
I'm very frustrated with
what Carol mentioned.
Carol mentioned.
People using
Disabled
just
spots
a couple minutes.
for just a couple minutes.
Or they drop off. Whatever it is they have to drop off.
While they drop off whatever it is they have to drop off. This also applies to delivery vehicles, FedEx, UPS. You know what I'm talking about. They will oftentimes
park in disabled spots. Because there may be 2 or 3 spots open.
There may be 2 or 3 spots
That
open.
makes it easy
And that makes it easy
for them to pull their truck. And
And it oftentimes
is the closest place to the entry point
is the closest place to the entry
of
point
that vehicle.
of that building.
And also,
I oftentimes go to a building where
people will turn in their vouchers.
People will turn in their vouchers to get paid.
And they will
oftentimes park in the disabled spots. Because it's the closest parking place to the entrance.
They have noticed that
I have noticed that
when I came here today,
when I came here today,
the disabled spots were all filled up.
the disabled spots were all filled up.
But
Fortunately,
somebody was leaving.
somebody was leaving.
So I went around
So I went around
the block and
came back
and
they were gone.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you for this opportunity.
If you have any questions, be very willing.
Say that again?
If you have any
If you have any questions, I'd be very willing to answer them
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
Well, thank you very much. Mr. Volpe, you may have said that you have a soft voice, but let me tell you how powerful it is. Thank you very much for making time to be here today, and for you, Thomas, as well, to assist us. You know, independence is important, and making sure that you have the same access as anyone else is something that's critical to this commission. I think what we've witnessed here today is, you know, Carol, your advocacy, and Mike, you being here, and just the folks that are helping us to really be informed about what changes need to happen and how those changes impact lives. And we can't do that alone, and so thank you for being a part of the team that helps us do the right thing and make sure that we can affect change for everyone in Oregon. So I will turn to my colleagues and see if you have comments as well. If not, we have a motion in front of us, please.
I just wanted to thank you, and one of my pet peeves is seeing people put shopping carts in that area.
Oh, boy.
And I saw a solution on Facebook the other day. You zip tie the cart to the door.
He says, and bicycles.
And bicycles.
Yes. Well,
So-
it's not bad enough to have snow, and I mean, there's just inclement weather. There are so many barriers. We don't need to add more. And it seems so simple, it's common sense that you wouldn't park there, but apparently common sense isn't so common. So we need to set policy and, you know, make further improvements to be very clear about what's expected and what's not.
I just want to thank you for coming. We appreciate your comments, and they're powerful and influential.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Could I quickly mention, Michael
Please.
is also a member of the Oregon Disabilities Commission.
Well, thank you for your service. Okay, shall we, I would welcome a motion if we don't have any other questions or comments.
We're gonna fight now. Madam Chair, I request approval to make, I'm sorry, whoops, I lost my place. Where was I? Standards for, yes, standards for accessible parking places.
Okay. Any further, do we have a second?
Second.
And any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. And to both of you, thank you for the responsiveness, for helping me get informed about this as well. And Carol, it's really a pleasure to work with you, both locally and now on this issue as well. Please let us know if there are other things that we should be working on, and your
I will.
Okay, I know that you will.
I have a list.
Oh, good. It matters, and we appreciate you very, very much.
Okay, thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Mike. Great to meet you. Okay, next we have another action item requesting the approval to make targeted safety-related investments, and it has to do with safety improvements. And both of you, Mac or Troy, who would like to take the helm? Okay, Mr. Lynn, please.
Thank you, Chair Boehne, members of the Commission, Macklin, Interim Highway Division Administrator. I've asked Troy to join us here, given the spirited discussion last month, as well as his engagement in safety. I'm certainly not the expert, so I'll rely on him for pieces of this as well. Just in terms of a recap, and Commissioner Brown, you weren't there at the commission meeting last month, but just to ground us in this conversation, the commission asked staff to go back and say, what can we do to put some investments on the table to help respond to the conversation you heard from OSP Superintendent Hampton around OSP trooper staffing levels. So That's us coming back today with that response, if you will. A couple of things
Was this also when the director left the room and we started to get very generous with funding? I think we should highlight that as well.
I think Whoppers were involved.
Right, yes. So you were there for this one. It was a little later. There was another. Yes, yes.
Yeah, so a lively discussion, and I know I reflected probably one of the more robust discussions on the fly around what can we do as an agency and as a commission to support this area of safety. So just reflecting on that for a second, what Superintendent Hampton referred to in his presentation was just low staffing levels across the state, as well as the attrition they've done throughout time in changing their business practices. And the map that comes to my mind is what he showed of the Salem to Albany area, where they're putting troopers, maybe 1 or 2 is all between that section of I-5. But then his map showed all those red X's on those rural corridors outside of that I-5 corridor. That's where the fatalities and serious injuries are occurring. So in response, you all asked, what can we be doing? We can't use state gas tax dollars to fund those trooper positions, and of course that's a heavy conversation, but what can we do? And so we entertained a conversation with our experts in the agency, our region managers. Several of those are in the room today, and we can ask them to provide any context on any specific investments, as well as Troy and his staff, building on those partnerships we have with OSP on a daily basis. And I think for me, it's coming down to what are the limitations of the funding we have? What can we do in this area? And it's focusing on a couple things. What's our response? So what can we do to support our maintenance crews and our incident responders to support in areas where OSP trooper strength may not be as high as we would like it? What kind of awareness, whether that's speed feedback signs, curve warning signs, delineations, what kind of things can we be doing on the ground? What operational support can we provide? Marilyn Holt was here this morning, district manager in Pendleton. I think she echoed the sentiments in our discussion around what the district managers, our maintenance crews feel already with lower staffing levels from OSP, in particular in our winter snow zones. If they're not there to enforce chain restrictions, for instance, first truck that goes up the hill and spins out, catastrophic impacts all the way down the chain, shutting down the freeway. All of our major snow zone routes experience that level of engagement. You heard Superintendent Hampton, speak to Santiam Junction, for instance, and having troopers up there. The other is enforcement, and I'll let Troy speak to that here in a second as well. What can we do with our limited ability to fund overtime hours of troopers to help with enforcement in critical areas? And then finally, infrastructure. What can we be doing on the ground to help with the infrastructure needs? Rumble strips, durable pavement markings, better signage, speed feedback signs is another one we're deploying. What can we be doing in those areas? And the focus really is on those rural highways. So 70% of our fatalities occur on those rural roads. So targeting that investment there. So what you have in front of you in this letter is focusing on those areas that we historically look to in our programs to fund safety improvements. What can we do to reprioritize some of those investments, leverage the funding already identified, advance some critical projects, really with the urgency that you employed on us in our last conversation around how can we make these improvements faster and get them on the ground sooner. So with that, I'll walk through kind of what is the high-level overview of those investments. First is enforcement funding. And Troy, I guess I'd turn to you to talk about what we're able to do in that area, and then I'll get to the infrastructure side.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, Troy Costales, Safety Division Administrator for ODOT. Thank you for the opportunity to be back with you again, following Superintendent Hampton's conversation. And Mac did a great job of lining out what the response is. And from an enforcement point of view, while this particular moment for this memo talks about $218,000 for our grant to the Oregon State Police, which Commissioner Brown, as an OTSC member, actually had a hand in just recently for our 2018 Highway Safety Plan, provides for 2,200 hours of patrol. It's part of a bigger mix. The Safety Division has about $4 million of funding that goes to the Oregon State Police for equipment, for training, and for overtime, and that's partly because the rules around the funds. We have to show that we are enhancing service and that it can be dedicated. And when working with law enforcement, particularly with Oregon State Police, that typically comes across in overtime. That way, as the map that Mac referred to for that Salem-Albany stretch, when calls for service come in, the trooper has the ability, when on overtime, is to stay dedicated to the task that the overtime is funding for. Whereas if they're on straight time, the calls for service then come in, and it creates a rather administrative burden, because then the trooper's conflicted and they have to actually track their time. Are they on the dedicated funding that they're getting, whichever it might be from any source that they receive, or is it a situation where they're going to calls for service? So quite often when we extend money to the Oregon State Police, it's typically going to be for overtime so that individual can stay dedicated. But you also have to watch for burnout, because you can continue to add more hours on more funding, and as the superintendent talked about with 70+ vacancies, the folks that are eligible to sign up, the men and women that wear the uniform to be able to be on the roads, there's only so much overtime that they can take before they start to become exhausted. So we work strategically with senior command, the Oregon State Police, related to the overall package that we extend to them, but also then for their needs, such as snow zones, such as issues of speeding or their Fatal 5, the superintendent addressed. And then here with road departure, lane departure, particularly in areas where we can complement the enforcement side with some infrastructure items that the rest of the department can help fill in. We talk about what's the appropriate placement and the amount of money, and as you saw with their patrol offices around the state, where they have staff that can even respond, because they have quite a few offices that don't have anybody, and nobody is covering 24/7 at this time. So we do engage. It's not just something that's a simple conversation. We pick a number and off we go. It's great working with Captain Bloom, and you may have met her before, but somebody that's a superstar within their organization that's very much up on what's going on, and we do work hand in hand and meet frequently to make sure that for the safety of those traveling in the state, but also the safety of the troopers around the state, that they are in a good place and have the ability to have the resources they need to provide the public safety service we ask of them.
So to me, that's a direct engagement with OSP and what can we be doing in this area. Some things that we can do, I'll walk through. Two things I wanted to mention before we get to the activities and the projects or the investments. One is our incident response. So over the probably 2 decades where we've had incident responders, certainly in the metro area in Portland, starting there. I think COMET forces, or COMET was the term used back then, and expanding that to Region 2 and to other places. Region 3 recently added 2 new incident responders to their Rogue Valley area, taking folks off the ground, right? Taking our maintenance workers out of that arena and putting them into that incident response category, largely due to the fact of lack of response from law enforcement. So as they lean on us more, we're changing our workforce to support that. The other example is, what are we doing to shift our crews? So what are we doing with our crew schedules to support when the travel is occurring, when those accidents or incidents are more likely to occur? So shifting our employees around to provide a little more coverage. In some of our rural parts of the state where we have 4 or 5 people on a crew, we don't have that luxury, right? You take 1 or 2 away to be on a weekend shift, it really diminishes the ability to do work during the week. So we, I think, are balancing where can we shift our resources around to better support that need that we're certainly feeling. Sitting in front of our district managers talking about this, common theme across the board, recognizing what can we be doing. So next I'll step through kind of what are some of those targeted investments. First is our All Roads Transportation Safety Program, or the ARTS program. These are projects already identified through the STIP. It's a significant investment every 3 to 4 years in that program for safety improvements. We asked our region managers and staff to say, what could you advance in that portfolio? So not new money, but what could you advance quicker? So what other projects in your portfolio could you delay to get these projects completed and under construction next summer or sooner? So we've identified 4 projects. You'll notice many of those, just from the title, are low-volume rural roads. I will mention the Region 1 project says mumble strips. Not an error. We typically talk about rumble strips. Well, mumble, it's hard to say, is a new approach that we're taking. We get some feedback from people who live around those highways that experience that audible noise at 2 in the morning and are frustrated by that. So working with our engineering department, figuring out what kind of a different approach could we take. So a mumble strip, my understanding is it's a little less deep, right? It's a little shallower of a strip, and the spacing in between it allows for maybe a less audible reaction away from the roadway. Still serving that awareness piece as you're driving the vehicle, but not quite as loud, if you will, in the nearby communities. So we are deploying that. That's the first time, my understanding. So this is a little bit on the edge of innovation for us as we consider all those voices as we try to find the right solution.
Mac, we just don't want you to bring us tumble strips,
no.
Okay?
I laugh because Jackie asked me 8 times, are you sure that's not an error? So wanted to mention that. And I think that's the innovation that we see occurring with our staff, right, as we try to find that right balance of what can we be doing, knowing that we're not the complete solution, we're just one piece of that.
Well, and I know that there are areas in my own county that we could use that. We have an area in the Sun River area by Crosswater on the River Spring area, where if you're trying to golf or you live in Sun River, the part of the homeowners association, they too find that to be a bit of a nuisance. So I think local government would be interested in some of those new improvements as well.
So I see Mike Kimlinger still in the room, so I know he heard that, as that specification certainly comes from his shop as the state traffic roadway engineer. So I'll look to him to figure out how we deploy that to other folks in our department, as well as our partners throughout the state as we learn and go to school on that. So that's kind of our bigger safety program is the arts program, advancing some projects there. The next thing I'll move towards, and I wish Commissioner Simpson was here for this. I know this program is near and dear to him, is our Emerging Small Business Program, which is a program we have and a set aside of funding to really invest in those opportunities to work with our small business community, to engage them in projects under $100,000 where they can learn to work with not only ODOT but a larger public entity to do contracting work. So we always identify a large slate of improvements or projects across the state, mainly in our maintenance portfolio or facilities. So we asked our staff to look at what kinds of things can you do to improve safety on those rural roads, and mainly in those rural roads using those ESB or Emerging Small Business Funds. So you can see a slate of projects there we've identified. A number of things around removing danger trees, for instance, or removing trees that provide a shady area on a facility. As you heard, Superintendent Hampton and Troy speaks to it as well. Many of the reasons that we have high fatalities on those rural roads are departures, roadway departures. So how do we create that clear zone so when someone does leave the roadway, they're not impacted as severely? And the other thing you can see, there's a lot of cable barrier stuff. You've got some roadway delineators. Just where can we surgically place some additional infrastructure out on the roadway to support that? Some shoulder rock production, so how can we support folks when they are leaving that they're not launched, right? That there's a smooth transition. Hopefully they're not, but if in the case they are, that we lessen the impact. So just a suite of improvements there. And then lastly, our maintenance activities. This is the bread and butter of our work. And as we move into the last half of the biennium, we're constantly juggling the need to hold on to funding for winter operations, but also what kind of improvements can we be making. So our district managers, mainly with the direction of our region managers, went through and said, what can we be doing as an agency to make some of those critical, mainly low dollar investments? Probably many of them have already been on the books for a while. And maybe already were slated to be completed, but how can we put some more targeted investments there? So a whole lot of stuff on that list, a reflection of the work that our maintenance folks are doing. Of a particular note, I'll mention speed feedback signs. That was a particular interest from the district managers. And I think when you were in John Day, you heard that from many of the locals on the act, recognizing those higher speed facilities and then entering into a community. And the lack of enforcement presence, simply adding another sign doesn't really justify it. What kind of response can we do to provide additional awareness? And those speed feedback trailers, those signs that are out there that are flashing at you, given your speed, are becoming one of those tools that certainly is a tool in our toolbox we want to deploy further in partnering with local communities, is my understanding. So splitting the cost in many cases with them. So in Region 5, I know several there, and then down in Region 3 as well. As I think several of the regions actually have these on the list. So I think that's one use of technology, leveraging on your discussion yesterday, that can be a surgical strike in this area. Troy?
If I could just add to the speed feedback signs, one of the things that is interesting over time, if you think back, some of us can go back 25, 30 years ago, we had to drive our car. Now we guide our cars very often. And the symptom is called velocitization. People just get used to going so fast that they just don't realize in around them how fast they are actually going. And it's easy to pick up speed. So using these feedback signs in areas of concern, such as school zones, or in corners, or in neighborhoods, or in the entry area into towns coming off of a higher speed facility is extremely important, and it helps bring back that awareness of how fast you actually are going. And the work being done in and around roadside is extremely important, because when there is a mistake, we would like people to have that recovery zone to be able to come back into the lane and not experience a tragedy because of their mistake.
So to wrap up my comments, I'd be remiss not to acknowledge how often my phone beeps with a fatality, unfortunately. I was reflecting with my wife one day as the phone keeps beeping that we recently had a baby. We have a 7-month-old. And in the Salem hospital, there's a little chime that goes off every time a new baby's born. It's kind of one of those little hidden things. And unfortunately, as my phone keeps going off, it's the opposite of that. It's a reflection that someone just lost their life. So I just wanted to end with, as of earlier this week, 382 fatalities in Oregon, and that's up 15.5% from last year. So just to put a point on the urgency of this work. So appreciate the discussion, and certainly answer any other questions you might have. And also, does this kind of respond to what you were asking for?
First, let me say thank you for acknowledging the human side of the work that we do. You know, the families, that, you know, it's someone's family. It's, you know, we take the safety piece as our top priority, and I think that's reflected in the conversation that we had last month. Mm-hmm. I very much appreciate the body of work and the quick response to get something back to us. I suspect this was not easy. So how much of this is actually new money that's necessary? And what kind of guidance can we give you today that will be beneficial?
Yeah, Chair Boehne, I think great question, one I'm just predicting. So I would say none of this is new money, right? We're restricted with our budget and our limitation that we have through the legislative process, as well as direction from you all in the STIP as we build that. It's more a targeted prioritization of how we're utilizing those funds through the rest of the biennium. Much of this, I think, was already on a list somewhere. These folks are not just, oh, all of a sudden we're thinking about safety, right? But I think it was a little push to say, we're going to prioritize and target that this biennium over maybe some other things. So no new money. The ESB funding is probably the greatest example of we're constantly evaluating how much funding we have coming in through that specific requirement and how we're utilizing those funds. So that's, I think, probably the newest investment that we're getting. Maintenance funding is always limited. It's always a high demand. Many of the activities there you see are low dollar things that I think we would be looking for on a constant basis to be doing, and the direction from you all I think is a nice little push to do that. It's not without, you know, sacrifices in other places, so I think that goes without saying, as well as the projects that we're advancing. I think we'd like to advance a lot more, but the limitations of just doing that work just don't really fit well to the urgency at which you were asking for. So I think for today, I think it's great guidance, right? It's a little push from you. It's a push that we felt into the agency and pushed back up with this proposal. As we move into the next STIP cycle, it's a longer term conversation. I think that's a great place to be having discussions with Troy, with Doug Bish, with others in our agency around what's the systemic things that we can be doing in our safety program to help support this area of safety, as well as what's the connection point to that trooper staffing levels. And then we're constantly, every 2 years we're doing a new budget, looking at our ESB program or maintenance limitation. I think it's a great opportunity to have this position, Chris, come back along with other partners of the agency to talk about what are we doing in this area of safety, because we're doing a lot and we always will be.
We had a discussion about the unanticipated redistribution funds as well. And so is there any capacity there for shuffling of funds to be able to make sure that we're not causing such a issue with other, the reprioritization of projects?
Madam Chair, if you recall, we actually dedicated those funds to certain projects. Now, if you look ahead, and it seems we are fortunate each year to receive those type of funds. I think being maybe intentional as to where you'd like to place those, because that is monies that come back to us that we need to obligate very quickly. So if there is an understanding, it is these types of activities that we'd like to go put the future redistribution funds toward. Good, that's good guidance. But when you do that, remember, we've used redistribution, and you brought up CMAQ at one time, just to bring that issue again. But being intentional, and I think that was the conversation that played itself out last month after the superintendent spoke. The commission reacted to that. I think the agencies reacted to it. If we need to be a little more forward-looking, that is an opportunity.
Okay. And I do know that and recognize that we have commitments that we've made with CMAQ and with the hope of future additional redistribution funds. So this is a good conversation to be having and a good challenge, I suspect. But I very much appreciate how you've been able to work with the regions to come up with a prioritized list. One last comment, and that is that I also am sensitive to not owning the OSP challenge too. We are partners, and while I worry about our own response teams, even my own example that I shared last month of late night, dark corner, that sort of thing, and OSP not being able to respond at all. Those types of activities, we can only do so much on our side of that ledger. So how we walk this alone without, with managing expectations of what the Department of Transportation does in terms of response and safety and enforcement, if you will. So I don't want to be disparaging to the partnership conversation, but I am sensitive that I don't want us to lean too far of owning areas in which are not ours.
Madam Chair, I appreciate that. I think that's a realistic statement, to be very honest. We all have obligations and responsibilities and authorities and a mission to meet. As was articulated last month, very strong partnership with the Oregon State Police. And Troy is much more eloquent than I on this front. But we do speak about the 4 E's, and we're kind of the engineering side of the 4 E's. Now, the enforcement conversation has come into play, but I think it was mentioned yesterday and certainly has been mentioned before. Our greatest challenge is behavior, as 90+%, 94%, I think NHTSA says, of accidents and fatalities. There's some behavioral problem. So we can take the investments we have, try to influence behaviors with the investment and more troopers being visibly present on sites, work zones, and such. But a lot of what we're doing here are operational fixes, engineering type fixes. It all complements, whether it's engineering, enforcement, emergency services, as well as education. Those are the big ones, and here we're seeing a specific strike. Trying to stay in our lane, because you're exactly right. Superintendent Hampton and his troops, they have an obligation and a responsibility that they're going to have to take hold of as they continue their conversation to put just more boots on the ground. So I think I appreciate your statement, because it's just a statement of fact.
And I agree with you on some of this. One of the things and Troy, maybe you can speak to this, but when there is an accident and a fatality and the shutdown of the road, it takes a long time for them to gather all the evidence and do all that work. And one of the things that I don't know how we can do this, but encourage the drone, using drones to recreate the accident, because it has actually reduced the time of shutdown. And when we talk about our incident response teams, they're on the ground all that time waiting for the cleanup. So I think that having that partnership, having that conversation in Troy, I'm not sure where the money comes for the drones for that program, but I think it's something we need to encourage them because it impacts ODOT directly.
Commissioner Brown, yeah, thank you for recognition. Those scenes are essentially could be, a homicide scene. And so when, collecting the evidence is important, because once you open the roadway, the evidence will disappear. And so that's why law enforcement takes their time to go through and check and see where there's marks on the asphalt or on the curb or the guardrail, et cetera. OSP has done a pilot project with the drone and using some of the technology and leaning on some partners around the world, actually, that are seeing how you can gather the information, gather the adequate information, but then also then start to be able to reopen the highway, but done in a safe and sane manner and taking care of the people that may be in that situation. And we have, as an organization, we've helped the Oregon State Police with an earlier rendition, something called Solicitation. That was the first work of doing some automated work of recreating the scenes. And there's some ability to do some on-ground work as well. The Oregon State Police, when we go forward with our grant to them, we ask them, is this something where you need personnel? Is this training? Is this equipment? And let Oregon State Police then, for their filters and their needs, say, here's what we need to help us the best. And so Oregon State Police owns that ability in our conversation with them, and we try to be as open in that conversation from ODOT to the Oregon State Police to allow them to pick what's going to make the most difference. And if that's equipment, then that's what we've done. We've had moments in time where really training was an item where they needed to bring a set of folks in because of new laws that had come in place or new case law, so that we rely on them to bring those forward. And they've had very good success to where they've been in what has been typically an hour to maybe an hour and 15 minutes, getting that down to 25 or 30 minutes by using a radar. With that also is the person to run it and their training and where they're located. And right now with the Oregon State Police, sometimes personnel are shifted around the state. So all of a sudden you have an area of need. They had that equipment in that corridor, and that individual trooper now somewhere else in the state, now going through the training or into second unit or whatever might end up happening. So we try and have that management level conversation with the Oregon State Police about how we can put this in play. But you're spot on with that this is an opportunity because you have secondary crashes that occur in those situations as well. People in the queue, but also people on the ground that are providing emergency service and their safety. We have had incidents of people that are under the influence of intoxicants and have just basically gone around the queue and all of a sudden are in the middle of the mix of a scene. And we wanted to make sure we take care of the folks on the ground safely as well.
It just boggles my mind that we have to do so much to keep people from their own behavior. I mean, just our earlier conversation, it's not enough that it's next to a handicap parking spot, but then it's hashtagged and it's identified, but you still have to say no parking. And we may have to add a flashing light at some point that actually draws attention to the writing of no parking. I mean, it's...
Madam Chair, I thought you captured it well. Common sense just ain't common practice.
No, it's just not. And when we're talking about the life safety of both the team that's responding and the individuals that are traveling, I mean, it's just, it just boggles my mind. Please.
Well, I'll just join in thanking you for the quick response. I think this is responsive. I think this is helpful. Mac, I like your idea of a continuing discussion into the future and where we can make appropriate investments that help to address and mitigate risk and drive fatalities and injuries down in the system. That's obviously a primary objective of ODOT. And so I appreciate everything you've done here and look forward to this being a continuing discussion. I would move to a motion unless there are other comments. No, please. So I move approval of the proposed targeted safety-related investments.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much. We look forward to future conversations. All right, we have a sort of a consent agenda. So, Director, do you want to walk us through?
Complicated.
Yes, exactly.
We do, and given the fact that we have some concerns expressed and conflicts, I'm going to request several individual actions here, and eventually we'll get to a point where I'll ask for approval in block on
Okay.
some of the items. But that said, starting with consent calendar item 1, given the realities that Commissioner Brown was not there, it's a little bit awkward to ask her to vote on something. So what I would do, Madam Chair, is ask that we pull agenda item, consent calendar item 1 forward, and I would request the Commission approve the minutes of that September 2018 Commission meeting.
Okay.
So moved?
Okay, second. Further discussion? Commissioner Van Brocklen?
Aye.
And Chair votes yes. So that motion carries.
That motion carries. So now let's move to consent calendar item 3. Commissioner Vice Chair Van Brocklen has indicated that he has a conflict, and so what I'd like to do is a 2-step request specific to the resolution for authority to acquire property. I would like to pull forward file number 9444-001. It is the Miller's property in Estacada. I would like to pull that file forward and ask the Commission to approve that specific file.
Madam Chair, my law firm represents Miller Properties, and therefore, in an abundance of caution, I am recusing myself from that matter.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair. I would welcome a motion.
So moved.
Okay, any further discussion? Commissioner Brown?
Aye.
And Chair votes yes.
Excellent. And Madam Chair, now I'd like to return to the remaining files and request approval of the remaining files in the resolution for authority to acquire real property.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
Excellent. The next individual conversation I'd like to pull forward is specific to consent calendar item 4A. It is the amendment to Oregon Administrative Rule 734-059-0100 relating to outdoor advertising signs and a fee increase. There has been a delay in approval coming from the Department of Administrative Services. We have a timing issue here. I would ask for approval, but I'd ask for conditional approval on this. What I would ask, Madam Chair, is the Commission approve the amended, approve the Administrative Rule 734-059-0100, amended conditionally on the Department of Administrative Services approval of the fee increase. I would also ask that direction be given to the Oregon Department of Transportation not to file the rule with the Secretary of State's office until we receive that DAS approval. And should we not receive it, then we will come back to the Commission and ask for a rescission of the conditional approval of the fee increase.
So moved.
Second. Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion
Excellent.
carries.
Madam Chair, we'll continue with the remainder of the consent calendar 4. I would ask approval in block of 4B, C, D, E, F, and G.
And 2.
Not yet.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Outstanding. Okay, we've cleared the airspace. That's good. Now I will ask for final approval in block of the remaining consent calendar items 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, for discussion, I would just add that the awareness of item 6, which is that we are requesting that the governor proclaim December as Drinking and Drug Driving Awareness Month as we talk about safety. I think all of those proclamations and awarenesses are critical.
Very well said.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We have completed the consent agenda. Yes, do we have anything else to come before the commission? Okay, so seeing none, we will go ahead and adjourn our official meeting. We have lunch, and then we have a continuation of our workshop as well. Great, thank you.